My toxic best friend overstepped by claiming maid of honor, disrupted wedding plans, and planned her wedding on my date to create chaos. Original post. Some background info about this girl. Let's call her Jess. At this point in her life, she's kind of a hot mess. She's one of those people who airs everything on Facebook, who has a new love of my life every month, and a new best friend every few months. Her relationships and friendships usually end terribly, with both sides hating each other. How did I become her best friend? Well, she hasn't always been this way. She was relatively normal 5 years ago when I met her, save for the normal, early 20s drama. But in the last 2 years, she's lost her mom to cancer and her grandpa to old age, and she doesn't have any other family. She dropped out of school and found out her boyfriend at the time was cheating on her. After the breakup, I was acting like a shoulder to cry on since she had pretty much hit rock bottom. A few months later, she was telling everyone how close we were and started tagging me as her best friend. A few months ago, I got engaged. Unbeknownst to me, she started telling everyone she was my maid of honor, even though I've always planned on making my sister my maid of honor. But this was right after Jess's mom had died, so I just improvised and said I would have 2 maid of honors. It's still not what I would have liked, but I literally couldn't bring myself to tell this poor girl I don't consider her my best friend. That was my first mistake. About a month after I got engaged, she met a guy. 2 weeks later, she was engaged. A week later, she was married. A month later, she was divorced. Separated? I don't know if it's legal yet. I don't know if anything was legal, but she changed her last name and is still going by that, so I'm guessing it was legal. Ever since the divorce, my own wedding planning has become unbearable. She is constantly telling me how marriage doesn't work, love can't save things, etc., etc., and criticizes how much I'm spending on my wedding when she had hers for a few hundred. Vegas wedding? It's gotten to the point where she's rude to the vendors I'm meeting with, but she gets really upset when I don't take her to meetings since she's the maid of honor. So I'm at the point where I just want to cut her out of the wedding, like I should have done in the first place. However, when I confessed this to a mutual friend, my friend let me know to be careful because Jess can be really vindictive. When she found out her ex from a few years ago was getting married, she tried to contact the bride and tell her he was cheating on her. He wasn't. One of her last besties was fired from her job because Jess made multiple email accounts and regularly contacted customer service complaining about her. And since she knows so much info about my wedding already, I'm really terrified that she'll somehow try to sabotage it. So basically, I don't know what to do at this point. I feel like this wedding is getting away from me, but I also don't know if it'd be less painful to keep her a part of it, because it would save me all the drama. I don't know what she's capable of, so I'm really worried that she'll somehow make everything harder for me if I don't just grin and bear it. Help. Clutter girl I've been comforting through traumatic times turns out to be batshit crazy, and now I think she's going to ruin my wedding if I don't go with the flow. Relevant comments. Comment 1. To add, it might be a good idea to have passwords with your vendors to confirm your identity. OP, thank you for the advice. I was actually considering the password thing, but I don't know if that's taking things too far. I guess I'm kind of worried about vendors resenting me for being high maintenance. But I hear about bridezillas, momzillas, in-lawzillas all the time, so hopefully this isn't the worst they've seen. Comment 2. Jesus just told her, Jess, you knew him for 3 weeks before you married him. What in the ever-loving fuck did you think was going to happen? If I've only been seeing a girl for 3 weeks, I won't even poop with her in a half-mile radius. Oops, seriously, the week before the wedding was everyone kindly saying, you sure? You've known him for awfully short time. And she responded, everyone's jealous because they can't be us. Yeah. Comment 3. Sounds like you need to have a very uncomfortable talk with this girl. Tell her what you told us here and let her know her negative attitude has no place in planning your wedding. You're sorry things aren't working out for her, but she is not allowed to pile this stuff on you. Tell her that you cannot have her as a maid of honor, and since she seems to think so negatively about marriage, you wouldn't expect her to do this. Up to you if you even let her attend the wedding as a guest. Oh my God, I haven't even thought about explaining how her negative attitude towards marriage could be the excuse for not having her in the wedding party. That sounds ridiculously logical, but I've been blinded by a flurry of crazy. Thank you. Update. Guys. This went full-blown crazy. Before I could have a conversation with Jess, she confronted me about it. Apparently the mutual I confided in let the whole story leak and a twisted, more dramatic version made its way back to Jess. Shit, meet a fan. It was an hour or two of me trying to explain to Jess in a somewhat calm manner that I felt she had overstepped her boundaries, and it was really taking a mental toll on me while she yelled about what a terrible friend I was and how she's tired of putting all of her faith in the wrong people, and how she was tired of trying her best to be a good maid of honor. I made the mistake of pointing out that I had never asked her to be my maid of honor in the first place, and she responded with, well then I must be delusional. The first step is admitting you have a problem, so. Progress. Needless to say, we aren't on speaking terms. Shortly after that I took all of your advice and called all of my wedding vendors and let them know that my fiancé and I were going to be the only people making any decisions, and set up a confirmation word with them. Apparently this shit happens a lot because nobody even asked why. I accidentally forgot to contact the bakery making our cake, but luckily they called me and asked if I was certain I wanted to cancel the wedding cake. Apparently there was a voicemail left on their machine. Wonder how that happened. Here's where things get really nuts. A few weeks after our blow-up she apparently met some guy who is the love of her life. A few weeks after that they're engaged. I can't make this shit up. She did it again. Then our mutual friends get invitations for her wedding, which is the same date as mine. But since they had RSVP'd for my wedding, a lot of them couldn't make it. A few days before her wedding, they have to cancel because he's already married. And you know what? So is she. I guess she never got officially divorced from that first quickie wedding. So as far as I know no wedding actually happened. I have no idea if they still plan to, I'm just glad to be away from that circus. But anyways, I got married a few weeks ago, everything was wonderful, the weather was great, and everyone present was a joy to be around. Except maybe my uncle who gets a little too dancy when he's drunk, but you know. Family. Thank you to everyone who responded, and to everyone letting me know I'm not helping matters by going with the flow. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends, by running from crazy and not comforting it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Anyone else think mutual friends are kind of shitty? She was the one who told OP to be careful about Jess, yet she decided it would be a good idea to blab about what OP told her, knowing full well it would get back to Jess. Now instead of telling Jess on her own terms, OP got ambushed instead. OP. I actually asked her about it a few days after the blow-up. Her defense was that she didn't actually tell Jess, she told another mutual friend of ours, who told someone else, who told someone else, who told Jess, so technically it wasn't her fault. Which is how by the time it got to Jess the story was somewhere along the lines of, OMG, Bubble Sex 1 is telling everyone you're ruining her life and sabotaging the wedding. All of us met at work, we all worked at the same restaurant long ago, and it was always a drama-filled place. A lot of the same people still work there and still thrive off of the drama. I'm thinking it's time for me to move on from that specific crowd. Cliques are fun in middle school. In your 20s, not so much. Comment 2. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends. By running from crazy and not comforting it. I'd like to nominate the first candidate for your new policy. The mutual friend, who somehow let the story leak, and repeated to Jess a twisted, more dramatic version of what you had confided in her. OP. I've decided to distance myself from that crowd. We're at different points in our lives, and I just don't find gossiping all that fun. My real besties, from high school who were all bridesmaids, have all grown up and we would never pull this crap. Comment 3. I bet Jess was never actually getting married this time. It was just a plot to ensure at least some of your friends didn't make your wedding. Oop. I suspect that as well, but since she's done it before I wouldn't be surprised if she actually went through with it. I'm assuming they were both trying to get divorced before the wedding and realized they wouldn't be able to in time, because you know, some stuff takes time and can't be erased in a jiffy, so they couldn't do it. I get the feeling this guy is either really stupid or just as crazy as she is, so at least they've found each other? My boyfriend dumped me over red flags, his best friend made up. He begged to return, but I made him confront her before cutting him off. I, 23F, had been with my boyfriend, Eric, 24M, for about 8 months. Eric had never had a long-term relationship before, and most of his ex-girlfriends were flings that lasted only 3 or 4 months. Naturally, I love to believe that this relationship was meaningful for him. But a few days ago, I discovered that may not be the case. Eric's best buddy, Olivia, 24F, has been his neighbor for more than 14 years. They met when they were 10 years old and have remained inseparable since. They attended the same school, college, and now work in the same place. When I say best friend, I mean it. Eric never does anything without consulting Olivia first. Even the decision to date me was not totally his own. He later told me that every lady he'd ever dated had to get Olivia's approval first. If Olivia asked him to end the relationship, he would. I believe this explains why his previous relationships failed. Eric only told me about this 4 months into our relationship, stating he believed it was time. I had already become strongly attached to him, so I chose to stay. Yes, I understand. Bad decision. If I had known about his unusual need for Olivia sooner, I would not have gone on a first date with him. My relationship with Olivia wasn't terrible, at least not until recently. Olivia and I met numerous times, and while we were polite, I had the impression she wanted to quietly show me that Eric would always be hers first. When it was just the three of us, she made me feel alienated and uncomfortable. Initially, I made every attempt to befriend her, but my efforts were futile. It appeared that she had already made up her mind against me. To make matters worse, I unintentionally made it into a competition between ourselves. She wasn't going to take it lying down. Finally, around 5 days ago, something occurred. I was feeling quite ill, and because I work away from home, I didn't have someone to look after me. My roommate was on a trip, leaving me completely alone. Normally, I wouldn't rely on a male, but this time, I called my boyfriend and asked him to come over and help me out. He was apprehensive at first, but I assumed it was because he didn't want to catch whatever I had. So I told him it was only a stomach illness and he will be okay. But, even so, he appeared reluctant. I asked him what was going on, and he said he was going to watch a movie and then have lunch with Olivia. He was unsure whether he'd be able to make it. I was already sick and not feeling well, and Eric was prioritizing Olivia over me. I had always understood that if it came down to it, he would choose Olivia over me, but it still hurt. I became incredibly furious off and told him he should date Olivia instead, then hung up. I didn't answer any of his calls after that. An hour later, Eric arrived and apologized for what he did. I was relieved when he arrived because, honestly, if he hadn't, I would have ended our relationship. He informed me that he had canceled his arrangements with Olivia and even brought me homemade soup. That day, I felt really positive about him. We spent the day together, and by the time he left that night, I was feeling much better. But I had no idea my actions would have ramifications. Eric stopped contacting me the very following day. No calls or texts for the entire day. I panicked a little, thinking something horrible had happened to him. I tried to contact him throughout the day but had no luck. At approximately midnight, he called me back. He talked in an entirely different tone, serious, even upset. After inquiring if I felt better, he suggested I sit down. Then he broke up with me. At first, I assumed it was a joke, but he kept talking. He said it was difficult for him to come to this conclusion, but he had finally understood that my conduct was nothing but a bunch of red flags, and that he couldn't stay with me any longer. I was completely confused. As far as I was concerned, I had not done or said anything to him that would have raised a red flag, at least not knowingly. I had always strived to be a decent person and a good girlfriend. This was a major shock for me. I didn't know what to say, so I remained silent as he informed me he couldn't be with me anymore. Then he hung up. The suddenness of it all astounded me. We had just had such a nice time together the day before, and now he was telling us we were overdue for red flags. It didn't make sense. I ended up weeping myself to sleep that night because I couldn't contact or text him for help. After we broke up, he blocked me everywhere. There was no way for me to receive closure or an explanation. Eric didn't even have the decency to break up with me in person, despite how long we'd been dating. He also did not provide a good explanation. For the next 2 days, I was extremely distraught and preoccupied at work and when completing housework. I just couldn't accept that it had ended so quickly. I kept repeating our last few exchanges in my thoughts, trying to figure out what had prompted him to suggest that I had a lot of red flags, but I couldn't come up with anything. The Olivia factor had not even occurred to me because I hadn't seen her in a few weeks and had forgotten how much she dominated Eric's life. Anyway, last night I finally got a call from Eric. I was taken aback because I hadn't expected it. I had just started to digest our separation, so it felt quite sudden. I answered the phone, and he immediately began apologizing. He didn't even give me the opportunity to say anything at first. He sounded hysterical, so I let him vent. He said he didn't want to break up with me. Olivia was the one who made him do it. Apparently, she disliked the fact that I forced him to cancel plans with her and convinced him that it was a red sign. She even brought up a few of other seemingly innocuous things I do to depict me as a giant red flag. Eric said he had fallen for it. Olivia, he claimed, had fed him a series of lies, alleging that I was attempting to build a rift between them and that this was a warning sign. She also distorted things like me preparing meals I like or buying clothes for him that I believed he'd look beautiful in, making them appear as manipulative efforts to control his life. I couldn't believe anyone would fall for such rubbish, let alone break up over it, but Eric was probably an idiot. He then apologized for everything and begged me to accept him back. He claimed he was willing to do whatever it required. My blood was boiling, so I said nothing for a time. I struggled to keep my rage under control. All this time, I blamed myself for the breakup, believing it was my responsibility. But now I see that was all Olivia's doing, and she was most likely fine with it. I should have expected her to try anything to get back at me. After all, I had stolen Eric from right beneath her nose. When I was sick, his decision to care for me and cancel our plans must have made her perceive me as a competitor. She couldn't have it, so she made sure we broke up. Everything suddenly made clear. Eric was pleading with me over the phone, imploring me to accept him back. He even had the arrogance to say that Olivia would no longer be a problem because he would keep our connection a secret from her. I was appalled. Even after all had transpired, he couldn't realize how much Olivia was in charge of his life. If he had broken up with me for another reason, I might have considered taking him back. But I couldn't believe he ditched me over something Olivia had said without considering for himself. Eric was clearly an imbecile. Whether or not he kept our relationship covert, Olivia would maintain control over him, and he would continue to do anything she wanted like a puppet. What upset me even more was Eric's refusal to recognize that Olivia might not have his best interests at heart. He was even willing to hide our relationship in order to keep their so-called friendship. This was a huge red flag for me. I had no intention of getting back to him. I had already made up my mind the moment he revealed the true reason for the breakup. I'd cried enough for this person, and he didn't deserve it, but I couldn't just let it go without trying to put Olivia in her place. That's why I did something so selfish and manipulative, and, while I'm not proud of it, I believe it was necessary. Last night, I told my boyfriend that I would only get back with him if he notified Olivia about his decision and confronted her for controlling his life. He'd have to inform her that she wasn't his employer and that he'd be getting back with me regardless of her. Only if he did that would I contemplate getting back together, because if Olivia humiliated me, I would undoubtedly reciprocate the favor. When I told Eric what I wanted him to do, he was horrified and tried to persuade me to reconsider, stating it was excessive and unneeded. He protested for a long, trying to get out of it, but I was determined. I informed him that I would only respond if he texted her what I had asked. Otherwise, he may say farewell and remain broken up. After a few more minutes of fighting, Eric finally gave in. He sent Olivia those texts and even provided me with a screenshot as proof. I instantly hung up and blocked him. I knew it was petty and cruel, but I couldn't help it. I'd been upset over the past 3 days about our breakup, and this was the least I could do to feel some sense of justice. AITA? Am I the asshole for forcing Eric to send Olivia those texts, especially since I had no intention of responding in the first place? Update 1. It's been 2 days since I spoke with Eric, and he hasn't been able to reach me since. Olivia is unable to contact me since I have also blocked her. I initially felt awful about what I forced Eric to do, but after reading the replies below, I realize I don't have a good reason to feel that way. Eric had a choice, and he chose to send Olivia those texts because he wanted to be with me rather than her. It's not like I held him at gunpoint. He did exactly what he desired. Yes, lying to him about getting back together was wrong. I accept it, but I don't believe what I did was as horrible as what had happened to me. He didn't think twice before convincing me that I was the red flag in our relationship when it was truly him all along. He did everything his so-called BFF requested him to do, regardless of how it affected me or his own life. He had no idea how bad I felt throughout the time we were apart. I had no answers and started overthinking what I'd done, which just made me more puzzled. So forgive me if I don't feel too awful about what I did. I haven't told anyone about my breakup with Eric yet, but I assume I'll have to start shortly. Only a few hours earlier, one of my friends invited Eric and me to her birthday celebration. When I arrive without him, I will have to explain his absence. I'm dreading that part because I'm not sure what I'll say when people ask why we broke up. Especially since we were happy on the surface. I'll have to come up with something, but that's okay. At the very least, I am done with that relationship. Update 2. Hello everyone, it's been over a week since I broke up with Eric. I assumed that blocking Eric and his BFF Olivia would mean that I'd never have to interact with them again. Unfortunately, this was not the case. This morning, I received a call from a number I did not know. Naturally, I let it ring the first time, but when they called again, I responded. It was Olivia on the phone. As soon as I heard her voice, I was prepared to hang up because I had absolutely no desire to chat with her. But then she warned that if I hung up, it would only reveal that I was a coward and frightened to confront her. I should not have let it affect me, but it did. So I stayed on the call. Olivia then went on to say terrible things about me right in front of my face. She called me a variety of names for what I'd done, including a sneaky little liar, and expressed her relief that Eric and I had split up since he was too good for me. Then she called me the B word, which really irritated me, and I snapped. I told her just what I thought of her. I told her she was nothing more than Eric's backup girlfriend and would most likely spend her entire life trying to keep other girls away from him so she could have him all to herself. I believe I struck a nerve with that one because, as soon as I said it, she began fumbling and sounding like she was about to cry. I took advantage of that and went even further. I informed her that she could scream at me all she wanted, but Eric had the option not to send her those texts. It was his decision, and he chose me over her. That was the final straw. On the other end, I could hear her start crying. I didn't feel sorry for her because she'd called to make me feel awful. But here she was, crying. I'm not sure if she and Eric are still on speaking terms, but I hope she runs to him and complains about what I said. If they come after me again, I'd love to put both of them in their place and remind them that I'm not someone they can mess with and get away with it. They aren't the only ones who have the right to damage others' sentiments. They need to realize that if they're comfortable handing it out, they should be equally comfortable receiving it. Update number 3. Hey, there. Olivia called me 2 days ago, and the conversation ended horribly for her. Like I stated, I was hoping Eric would confront me about it so I could tell them both off. That finally occurred today. The person who introduced us was hosting a party, and we were both invited. She was unaware that Eric and I had ended our relationship. Eric entered the party about an hour in, accompanied by Olivia. They both appeared ready to battle. I drew my friend aside and recounted the entire issue to her. I even offered to depart early in case things went wrong. While I wanted to cause a spectacle, I didn't want it to happen on my friend's birthday and steal the spotlight from her. It would not have been nice. But my friend suggested I stay. She admitted that she wouldn't mind if we confronted one another at the party because she wanted to see the drama play out in person, especially after what I'd told her. I had the decency to ignore Eric and Olivia since, if anyone was going to start a fight, it had to be them. I was classier than that. But when it came to teaching them their place, I was willing to fall to their level. Eric approached me about a half hour after they arrived at the party, while I was speaking with another guy. I wasn't flirting, just making normal small talk. I believe he simply wanted an excuse to put me down because he walked up and loudly stated that I had already moved on from him. He then called me a cheater and a phony in front of everyone. Olivia appeared behind him with a malicious smirk. I swear I wanted to slap that nasty smile off her face, but I managed to restrain myself. Eric was spouting crap right in my face, even bringing up the phone call from a few days ago. He said I was mistaken about Olivia being the backup since, in fact, I was the backup and not worth dating. I laughed in his face since, if I recall correctly, he was the one who came crawling back to me just days after dumping me over what Olivia had told him. He'd had his say. Now it was my chance to reveal him and his loving BFF for who they really were. I told him that both he and Olivia were much below my level. He should have counted himself lucky that he could persuade me to date him in the first place. As far as I was concerned, he was Olivia's spineless puppet, and no other woman would want him. At the very least, I was willing to give him a chance, but he blew that as well. Furthermore, his so-called BFF was depressed and insecure enough to want to end our relationship simply because he spent a day with me while I was unwell. She even utilized a new phone number to reach me, indicating how essential I was to her. Honestly, her acts betrayed her insecurity and pitiful nature. They were an ideal complement for one another. I genuinely hoped they got together because no one should have to cope with individuals like them. By then, the party had come to a halt. Everyone stared at us silently. Eric had nothing to say and simply stared at me. Olivia, without a clear response, began flinging expletives at me. She got up in my personal space, plainly trying to get me to punch her so she could retaliate. But I maintained my calm. I didn't even want to touch her. Eric decided to leave when she began to have a breakdown. They obviously did not want to be any more ashamed than they already were. Once again, their pitiful little attempt to humiliate me had failed. Eric had to literally drag Olivia away because she refused to accept defeat. After they went, my friend approached me, told me how awesome I was, and we all laughed about what occurred. We resumed partying and finished the evening on a high note with cocktails and a delicious dinner. I'm pleased with what happened because I got the closure I needed. Update 4. Hey everyone, here's a little update. My parents rejected me when I chose a blue-collar life, but now they want back in. Am I the asshole for refusing to help? Growing up in a wealthy Chicago suburb with a father who is a well-known professor at Northwestern University and a mother who is the stereotypical faculty wife, I, 35F, have always been the challenging twin. Early on, I discovered that I was supposed to take a very certain route. The ideal daughter, my 35-foot twin sister, accepted everything our parents desired. She epitomizes all of our parents' dreams, married a wealthy lawyer, and lives in a lovely home in Lincoln Park. From my earliest recollections, our house resembled a meticulously organized museum, with each item having its own location. While my mother's realm was the spotless living room where she invited faculty spouses for afternoon tea, my father's study was crammed with leather-bound volumes and academic honors. My sister and I were expected to be living examples of their success even as kids. Well-groomed, well-behaved, and constantly successful. Early on, the difference between us became apparent. My sister was very good in charm school and piano recitals, but I liked to lose myself in science fiction books and watch motorcycle races on TV in secret. Our mother's constant correction was the answer. Sit up straight, sweetheart. Don't cross your legs, cross your ankles. Every instruction was given with a smile that never quite made it to her eyes. Do try to smile more. The pressure definitely increased in high school. My sister became a member of every club that was relevant to her, including debate team, student government, and Young Republicans. Despite being compelled to do so, I didn't want to. I proposed setting up a fundraiser for a nearby motorcycle maintenance training program for at-risk teenagers during a particularly memorable student council meeting. For weeks, I was plagued by the terrified expression on my mother's face when she learned about it. The impact of our father was not limited to our household. He was well known in Chicago's intellectual and corporate circles as a renowned economics professor at Northwestern. These relationships served as the foundation for our futures and were more than just social capital. Through his network, every summer internship, college application, and employment opportunity was meticulously planned. I can still clearly recall the day he declared that he had gotten me accepted into Northwestern's economics program. I was shoving the remnants of my mother's expertly presented roast beef around in our formal dining room. He said, "It's all arranged," without raising his gaze from his wine glass. "Professor Richardson owes me a favor. You'll start in the fall." From the other side of the table, my sister, who is already in her second year of business administration, smiled. I could feel the walls closing in, yet I was at a loss for words. My life has always gone like that. I follow the meticulously prepared tracks even if my inner voice begs for a different course. Because it's what responsible young ladies do, I earned my MBA. I choose to work in corporate strategy at one of the best companies in Chicago because it's a fantastic opportunity. My entire career has been a masterclass in following expectations rather than pursuing my own desires. My everyday schedule is the ideal representation of the life I should aspire to. My wake-up time is 5:30 a.m. My mother picked my high-rise apartment on Michigan Avenue since it's a popular place for young, successful professionals to dwell. During required shopping trips with my mother and sister, I wore designer suits that were more expensive than other people's monthly rent. My mother constantly adds, "Appearance is everything in the business world, dear," suggesting a more conservative heel height or changing my collar. People who are living examples of what my parents want me to be are all around me at work. On most days, I hardly notice the breathtaking view of Lake Michigan from my 47th floor corner office. Rather, I meet with people who seem to actually care about quarterly estimates and shareholder value for hours on end to discuss market strategies and profit margins. With a passion I can't seem to summon, they enthuse about their vacation houses in Lake Forest, their children's private schools, and their memberships in country clubs. In an effort to keep us close, our mother insists that my sister come to lunch with me every Wednesday. Perfectly groomed and typically fresh from a board meeting at one of her numerous charitable organizations, she comes at precisely 12:30. She tells me about her picture-perfect life over expensive salads at the trendy restaurant below, including her husband's recent high-profile case, their plans to buy a second house in Aspen, and the prestigious daycare where their child is already on the wait list. She gently wiped her lips with a handkerchief last week and advised me, "You should join the junior league. Mother thinks it would be good for your social connections. Besides, you need to start thinking about marriage. All the best eligible men are involved in charity work." I instinctively agreed, as I've come to do when my family offers advice on how to live my life. In all honesty, this world of manufactured perfection is smothering me. While my colleagues enthusiastically debate market penetration tactics and hostile takeovers in meetings, I can't help but stare at the construction workers in the building across the street. They're making something substantial, doing something real. I can be so envious of them at times that it hurts. I found myself scribbling motorcycle ideas in the margins of my notes during a particularly dull budget discussion last month. Upon noticing, my direct report looked at me with anxiety. I promptly turned to a blank page and made myself concentrate on the supply chain efficiency optimization PowerPoint presentation. I heard him express concern to another management later that day over my dedication to the company's mission. Weekends are the worst. I'm stuck driving through the city's industrial areas while my sister and her husband go to country club parties and charity galas. I pretend that I'm working late, but in reality, I'm drawn to the unadulterated, authentic elements of Chicago that they deny exist. I observe those who make things with their hands and appear to truly like what they do, such as welders at their shops, artists in their studios, and mechanics working on automobiles. Everything changed last night. My BMW, my father's thoughtfully selected graduation present, began to make a menacing grinding sound after yet another heartbreaking day of acting as though I cared about market forecasts. I was in the wrong part of town, as my mother used to say, but I had to stop or risk getting stuck. Just before closing time, I stopped into a nearby auto repair shop and saw the check engine light flash mockingly. I met Jake at that time. With a welding torch in hand, Jake, 35, was the final guy left working, hunched over a handmade motorbike frame. Jake was authentic, work boots, faded trousers, and hands that demonstrated he truly made a living, in contrast to the polished business people my parents are constantly attempting to pair me with. He looked up and grinned, but it wasn't the staged smile I see at business events. It was sincere, it extended to his eyes. "Timing belt's about to go," he observed, having listened to my engine for less than a minute. "I can fix it now if you want to wait." Simple competence without any corporate language or ulterior motives. Even though I could hear my mother's disapproving voice in my mind about being in that neighborhood after dark, I found myself nodding. We chatted while he worked. Jake shared with me his experiences progressing from simple welding to more complex metalwork, his aspirations to start his own custom fabrication business, and his passion for creating things by hand. He showed me the motorcycle he was restoring, which fused contemporary engineering with vintage design. My practiced presentations about market expansion strategies seemed insignificant in comparison to the enthusiasm in his voice as he described the technical specifics. He said, "Want to see something cool?" He fixed my car and then showed me a part of the business with a number of finished projects. Every piece was distinct, the ideal fusion of creativity and utility. After years of moving papers in my corner office, I felt more a part of actual production as I ran my fingers over the beautiful curves of the metal. We ended up sipping coffee from the shop's antiquated vending machine and spoke until long after midnight. Jake told me about his upbringing with a single mother who was a nurse, his time at community college studying his craft, and the joy he gets from making something enduring by hand. I started talking more about my life, including the oppressive expectations, the constant comparisons to my sister, and the increasing sense that I was living someone else's fantasy. "You know," he began slowly, "metal's interesting. People think it's rigid, unchangeable, but with the right heat and pressure, it can become anything. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from metal that's been stressed and reformed." I did not fail to notice the metaphor. I've been seeing Jake practically every day since that night. After work in the shop, he has been teaching me the fundamentals of welding. The process itself is immensely fulfilling, the concentration needed, the observable outcomes, the way two disparate parts are permanently fused together. In contrast, nothing feels real in the fleeting realm of business strategy. Jake took me on my first motorbike ride around Lake Michigan last weekend. There were no conference calls, shareholder expectations, or family pressures, just the wind, the road, and the sensation of being fully alive. The freedom was exhilarating. In Wisconsin, we made a stop at a tiny diner, the kind of establishment my mother would never enter. It was the best coffee I've ever had at any of Chicago's best eateries. Jake is taking me to meet his mother tomorrow. Despite being retired, she continues to volunteer at the nearby hospital. Instead of the required awe I give my parents at Sunday dinners, he speaks about her with such sincere love and respect. I've never been more anxious before a corporate presentation than I am now. What's coming, I know. My folks will need to hear about Jake soon. My mother will weep, my father will threaten to cut me off, and my sister will be appalled. However, I'm prepared to make my own decisions for the first time in my life. I feel like I'm finally becoming into the person I was destined to be, not the person my parents wanted me to be, when Jake smiles at me. Perhaps having the guts to live genuinely is what true success looks like, rather than having a prominent location or corner office. I feel more alive than ever, yet I'm also scared. First update. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has changed. When I eventually told my parents about Jake, it was a complete disaster, worse than I could have imagined. I decided to tell them during our Sunday meal, which was required. My father's face went a shade of crimson I had never seen before when I revealed that Jake was a welder. My mother let her sterling silver fork fall to the exquisite china, clattering. Like a gunshot, the boom reverberated across our suddenly quiet dining room. My father spat the phrase, "a welder," as if it were toxic. "After everything we've invested in you, after all the connections I've built." For about 20 minutes, he launched into a tirade about family reputation and social status. My mother would alternate between giving me looks of complete betrayal and wiping her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. At first, my sister, who was there with her lawyer husband, genuinely chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Her face took on an expression of sheer fear as she realized I was genuine. She growled from the other side of the table. "You can't be serious. What about Richard from the golf club? His family's been asking about you." When I told Jake that I was thinking of quitting my corporate position to assist him in launching his custom fabrication company, the situation became heated. My father got to his feet so suddenly that his chair toppled over. "You are no longer welcome in this family if you pursue this absurd fantasy," he said, his voice shaking with anger. The peace that swept over me at hearing it was unexpected, but I had anticipated the threat. My sister's expensive outfit, my mother's exquisitely placed flowers, the oil paintings, and the crystal chandelier in the formal dining room all seemed to me to be of no use anymore. I said, "Then I guess this is goodbye," and got to my feet. Despite my mother's theatrical gasp, I kept gathering my belongings. My sister followed me into the foyer as I made my way to the door. She cautioned, "You're making a huge mistake. You're throwing away everything we were raised to be." "No," I said, getting stronger every step of the way. "I'm finally becoming who I really am. There have been many developments over the last 3 months. To the surprise of my coworkers, I left my corporate job. An emergency board meeting was called in response to my resignation letter, and my former employer continues to send me letters every week urging me to come back. Jake and I have been working tirelessly to launch our own company. In an industrial neighborhood, we discovered the ideal location. Although it needs some maintenance, there is a lot of potential and the rent is fair. My commercial experience is proven surprisingly helpful in establishing up our organization, and Jake's underwater welding talent has already drawn several significant clients. Jake's mother has provided the most surprising assistance. Warm, accepting, and truly interested in who I am rather than what she believes I should be, she is everything my mother is not. She arrived with homemade sandwiches and old trousers to assist us with painting the office area of our new store. I had never felt more at home in my parents' estate than I did when she embraced me, splattered with paint. Through her husband's legal practice, my sister issued me a formal letter last week requesting that I change my ways and rejoin the family. She reminded us of our family's reputation in Chicago society and provided a comprehensive list of available corporate jobs and eligible bachelors. I lit the new wood stove at our workshop using the letter. Finding a community I was unaware of has been the most unexpected development. We have been greeted warmly by our neighbors in the industrial area. We get coffee in the mornings from the car repair shop next door, and the local artists collective has already commissioned a number of custom metal works for their next show. Next month, Jake and I will tie the knot. There won't be a country club reception, a beautiful gown, or the society wedding my parents have been planning for me since I was born. In the workshop, surrounded by the things we've created together and the individuals who genuinely support us, we're holding a modest ceremony instead. The invitation was sent back unopened by my parents. Another legal letter from my sister threatened to declare me mentally incompetent. However, I can tell I've made the correct decision when I watch Jake work, witness his commitment to his trade, and experience the joy of creating something tangible. I saw my reflection on a polished metal piece this morning while assisting Jake with a challenging welding project. I felt more attractive and more like myself than ever before, even though I hardly recognized myself, work boots, jeans, and almost pulled back hair. Even if my family no longer approves of me, I've gained authenticity, which is far more valuable. In my new life, every burn from hot metal, every callus on my hands, and every late-night business brainstorming session are all medals of glory. Second update. After 6 months of marriage, Jake and I have experienced some unexpected changes in our lives. The most exciting news is that Jake's underwater welding certification has opened up contracts we never thought were feasible. Due in large part to Jake's specialist abilities being in great demand for marine infrastructure projects, our tiny business has grown quicker than we could have imagined. We secured a significant underwater repair contract with the Chicago Port Authority last month. I recognize the irony. The same blue-collar jobs that my parents mocked now generate more money each year than my previous corporate job did. With more specialized tasks, our custom fabrication business is flourishing, and Jake's salary has risen to $150,000. However, success has presented unforeseen difficulties. Surprisingly, word of our expanding company made its way to my former corporate circles in Chicago's industrial area. My old coworkers have begun contacting me, some with sincere congrats, others with barely concealed interest in our small business. My former boss called last week to propose a consultancy arrangement. I declined courteously. Our appearance in a local business publication was the biggest step forward. The article highlighted our special blend of technical know-how and business savvy, with a focus on successful career transitions. For the first time in months, my sister texted me the morning it was released. The article was read by me. "Congratulations, I guess," she wrote. "Jake's mother is no longer only his mother-in-law. I've always hoped I had a parent like her. She frequently stops by the shop with handmade food and a sincere interest in what we do. She recently assisted us in setting up a training program for aspiring welders, a cause close to her heart after witnessing the transformative power of welding on her son's life. Our workshop has developed into a gathering place for the neighborhood. In addition to hiring 3 local apprentice welders, we have begun providing weekend workshops for those with an interest in metalworking. We have worked with a number of local artists on public art projects, and the owner of the car repair company next door sends his younger mechanics to learn from Jake. The work's physical demands have altered me in unexpected ways. Work clothes that are useful have taken the place of my luxury suits, which are still hanging unworn at the back of our wardrobe. I have developed muscles I never knew existed, and my hands are now calloused. There are more than just physical improvements though. I now carry myself with a confidence that comes from doing something real rather than merely promoting papers. An unusual encounter occurred last week. At our workshop, I was overseeing a delivery when a beautiful Mercedes arrived. My sister's husband came out, looking totally out of place in his fitted suit. His legal firm wants to hire us to do some underwater inspections on their marina properties, therefore he would bring a business proposal. It was an uncomfortable but illuminating conversation. He acknowledged that everyone was surprised by our achievement. He hesitated before departing, saying, "Your sister follows your business in the news, but your father still won't talk about it. You seem different," he said to her. "Happier?" My mother would be horrified by the rhythm that has been established in our home life. We decided to put practicality ahead of elegance and purchased a modest home in a developing neighborhood. Our furniture is a combination of items we welded ourselves and old treasures. Although the garden isn't as well kept as my parents' estate, it is thriving with herbs and vegetables that we utilize on a daily basis. The wedding pictures, which were taken by a local artist who captured the genuine moments, arrived lately rather than by a society photographer. One shows Jake and I in safety gear, totally focused on the task at hand as he teaches me how to weld an ornamental arch for the ceremony. Another depicts us dancing in the workshop with our chosen family and our creations. As I look at them, I see that we have created something that, in spite of their wealth, my parents never had. True happiness. We've begun discussing starting a family, which raises more questions. I consider the principles we wish to impart. The value of creating, pursuing your own path, and gauging success based on fulfillment rather than prestige. My own parents have no idea that they could ever have grandkids, and Jake's mother breaks down whenever we bring up the subject. I found out yesterday that our workshop had received an invitation to my sister's forthcoming charity event. The note in the envelope wasn't what I expected, but it was addressed in her well-known handwriting. "I miss you," she sent. I haven't replied yet, but I said, "Maybe we could talk." A part of me understands that I can never return to my former self, but another part of me wants to make amends. Our most recent endeavor is a massive public artwork for the city that consists of several metal sculptures that symbolize change. I consider how much we've changed together as I watch Jake work on it, transforming metal into flowing shapes that seem to defy their material nature. Me from a corporate puppet to someone who at last feels real, and him from a talented carpenter to a prosperous business owner. The silent moment when we all shut up the workshop is the highlight of the day. Looking at what we've created, both the actual company and our life together, makes me feel accomplished in a way that no corporate success ever did. Even though my hands are rough today and my clothes smell like metal and honest labor, my heart is fuller than it was in my past existence. Life tends to come full circle. I hadn't seen my parents in more than a year until they unexpectedly dropped by our studio yesterday. They appeared smaller in some way. Northwestern's scandal had cost them dearly. Due to claims of harassment, my father, who was once a proud professor, was forced to leave. The very thing they valued above all else, their social standing, had fallen apart. My mother's fancy shoes were totally out of place on the store floor, and they stood clumsily in our workspace. Their superbly designed clothing stood out sharply against the background of our welding tools and ongoing projects. First to speak, my father's voice lacked the authority it usually possessed. In between my mother's hardly contained cries, the story poured out, "We need your help." My sister's husband, the accomplished lawyer they had always commended, refused to assist until they paid his entire legal bill after the scandal surfaced. My sister sided with her husband when they were unable to pay his rates. They were ordered to vacate the guest home at my sister's house where they had been residing. My mother remarked sourly, Your sister believes it will harm her reputation. The irony of what she said didn't escape my notice after everything we did for her. I recalled all the times they had cautioned me that picking Jake would harm the family's reputation. My father surveyed our studio, his gaze resting on the honors we had just received for our unique workmanship. The wall was framed with an article from the local newspaper about our success. From corporate to creative, local welding business makes waves. He said the words, "We thought perhaps we could stay with you for a while, with difficulty." Behind me, I sensed Jake's steady, encouraging presence as usual. He quit his job, but he didn't get involved, so I was free to manage my family the way I wanted. That small gesture of respect and trust said a lot about our relationship. When I truly looked at my parents, I realized what they were no longer able to conceal. The flawless facade was crumbling, and the fine clothing were a little shabby. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, not because they had accepted me or my decisions. "No," I answered in a firm voice. "You can't stay with us." The phrase released something I had been holding on to for too long, like a key turning in a lock. "You threw me out of the family when I chose this life. You can't come back now just because you need something." My mom's face fell flat. She begged, "But we're your parents." A hint of my father's former authority emerged as his face darkened. "After everything we've done for you." I cut in. "That's exactly the problem. Everything you did was to control me, to make me fit your image of success. When I found my own way, you disowned me. And now that my way has proved successful, you want back in?" I pointed to our workshop. "See all this? The business you thought was beneath you? It's thriving? The husband you rejected? He's more successful than most of your country club friends. The life you said would embarrass the family? It's featured in business magazines." "But that's different," countered my father. "We can see now that you've made something of yourself." "No," I interrupted him once more. "That's not different at all. You still don't get it. I didn't need to prove anything. My worth isn't measured by income or social status. I'm happy because I'm finally living authentically, not because we're successful." After a while, they departed, my father stiff with rage and my mother in tears. As we saw their fancy car drive out, Jake gave me a hug. Simply, "You okay?" he inquired. I was more than fine. I had freedom. As we shut down the store later that night, I reflected on the path that had led me here. The corporate job I had detested, the familial pressure I had fled, the love I had discovered, and the company we had established. I had been moving toward myself with each step I took away from my parents' expectations. I came to a surprising realization while examining our most recent project, a sophisticated metal sculpture that the city had commissioned. Life occasionally requires extreme heat and pressure to create something beautiful, much like the metal we deal with. That heat had been my parents' rejection, and I had grown stronger and more authentic as a result. They failed to realize that they were giving me a cage by attempting to reintegrate me into their culture. Regardless of how plated. With a partner who loves me for who I am rather than what he wants me to be, my home is now here, surrounded by steel and sparkles. I appreciate the Reddit community's support during this trip. Your advice and support kept me going when I was having self-doubt. I'm thankful for this platform that allows me to share my story because sometimes the most difficult decisions are the best ones. To everyone who must make similar decisions, remain loyal to who you are. Although the journey may be more difficult, the end result is worthwhile. My brother overheard his wife asking me to pay to edit out my disabled daughter from their wedding photos and immediately kicked her out. My younger brother David married Amelia, the joy of his life, just 2 weeks ago in a lovely and touching ceremony. Everyone who knew David could tell how much he loved Amelia, and he had been anticipating this day for a long time. Their invitation cards made it apparent that their wedding was once intended to be a totally child-free affair. That being said, David called me a few weeks prior to the wedding. He surprised me by telling me that he wanted to make an exception for my daughter Katie, who is his niece. Startled, I asked him if he was certain. David told me how much he adores Katie and that without her as their flower girl, he couldn't have the wedding. Hearing him say it nearly brought me to tears. Uncle David has always had a special place in Katie's heart, and she adores him. David reassured me that he had discussed it with his bride, and she was also in agreement. His sincerity was evident in his voice. He realized how much it would mean to Katie and didn't want her to miss such a significant day in his life. To put things in perspective, my daughter Katie was partially paralyzed at birth. The fact that she is unable to move her body beneath her arms has undoubtedly changed our lives. My husband Roger and I were devastated as parents when we first learned. The ground seemed to have been yanked out from beneath us. We refused to accept the diagnosis and were in total astonishment. We visited several doctors in a frantic attempt to get a different viewpoint in the hopes that someone could know the answer. We hoped for positive results from every test we could think of. We wanted to think that there could be a procedure or therapy available that could help Katie and give her the life she was due. However, the response was always the same, regardless of our actions or where we went. Nothing could be done. It was really difficult to accept that our daughter's situation was irreversible. We went through a difficult period that was full of tears, insomnia, and unanswered questions. We were totally powerless. Every time we considered Katie's future, our hearts ached while we gazed at our darling daughter. We gradually started to locate and establish connections with other families who were traveling the same path as us, which provided us with some comfort despite the overwhelming sense of powerlessness. We began concentrating on what Katie could do and providing her with as much love and support as we could, rather than on what she couldn't accomplish. Uncle David is among those who have consistently brought Katie happiness and light. Her illness never caused him to treat her differently. He actually has a knack of making my daughter feel so relaxed and at ease that her illness seems to vanish when they are together. I've always valued this, especially when other family members can occasionally, even unintentionally, make situations difficult or uncomfortable. For instance, my own mother was obviously shaken when she first saw Katie after she was born and saw how paralyzed she was. Her response surprised me, even though I knew it was a tough thing for her to digest. Rather than provide consolation or encouragement, she drew me away and whispered that I ought to attempt to conceive another child. One that could walk. When I heard her remarks, my eyes widened in surprise. My mother persisted in pressuring me, suggesting that perhaps if I tried again, I would have a better baby. It seemed as though Katie's illness made her insufficient or unworthy. I was taken aback. What a callous thing it was to say. David, however, defended me right away and chastised our mother for being so callous and cruel. He assured her that Katie was ideal just the way she was and that she didn't require comparison or replacement. When he stood up for my child, I will always remember the ferocity in his voice. When I was still grieving and accepting the reality of Katie's condition, he chastised our mother for pressuring me to become pregnant. Since then, I have minimized my interaction with my mother and have forbidden her from spending any alone time with Katie. In the meantime, David would visit my daughter every weekend, rain or shine, simply to be with her. They would play games, watch ridiculous shows, or just joke around for hours. Katie would light up for a few hours on those weekends in a way that was so innocent and happy. She can simply be a child enjoying herself with her worldly favorite. Both she and we have benefited from their relationship. I was therefore really moved when he called to ask if I might make an exception so that my daughter may attend his wedding. In addition to being a lovely way for David to celebrate their relationship on his special day, I knew that letting Katie be there would mean the world to her. I was thrilled for Katie to be a flower girl, so I consented to bring her along. I don't believe his wife Amelia was as excited about the prospect of having Katie at the wedding as David was. Amelia contacted me directly a few days after David called to give me the invitation for Katie. She told me that in order for her to let Katie attend their wedding, she had some requirements. The conditions annoyed me because they were strangely detailed. Initially, Amelia demanded that Katie wear a beige dress, which she described as flowing and appropriate for the wedding atmosphere. She also stated that Katie's hair had to be styled so as not to detract from the beauty of the wedding. Her demands were so domineering that I was surprised. But I decided to keep my mouth shut. After all, we had to follow her wedding theme because it was her wedding. I nodded in agreement and promised to follow her instructions because I didn't want to cause any conflict or discomfort for David. Ultimately, my top priority was for Katie to be able to support her uncle. I went out right away and got Katie a gorgeous beige dress. Amelia urged me to purchase it since it was understated yet sophisticated. My daughter would feel unique, I knew. Since Amelia had requested that I give her a photograph of the outfit after I bought it, I snapped a picture of it and sent it to her. To my astonishment, she wasn't satisfied, even though I had anticipated she would be. Amelia soon responded that the garment appeared lifeless and was too bland. I would like something a bit more colorful, she replied. I was perplexed and angry. Isn't this precisely what she requested? I didn't want to protest or argue, though. I was trying to maintain the peace as best I could. This time, I chose to send her a couple options before making a purchase rather than wasting my money on another dress that I bought on my own. I didn't want to spend money on something that she would undoubtedly turn down once more. When Amelia eventually selected one of the outfits I had received, I was astounded by what I saw. The dress she picked was almost the exact same shade of beige as the one I had previously purchased, which she had critiqued for being too beige. The slightest trace of a pinkish tone, which was almost perceptible, was the sole difference. I began to realize then that this had nothing to do with the dress or the color. Amelia was purposely complicating matters. She seemed to be putting me to the test or creating barriers to force me to do things that I didn't want to do. She hadn't told me outright, but there might be a reason why she didn't want my daughter to attend the wedding. I didn't want to cause her any unnecessary trouble. She needed to speak with my brother and work things out if she wanted to remove my daughter from the invitation. But she never did, and the wedding proceeded according to schedule. Katie looked magnificent as she walked down the aisle in her gorgeous beige dress, the one that Amelia had finally approved, on the day of my brother's wedding. As she wheeled forward, the dress flowed elegantly, and she paused to fling flower petals, her face beaming with joy. The whole room seems to stop. The visitors let out a loud gasp, and then there was a round of applause. As she continued down the aisle, distributing flowers and making her steady progress in her wheelchair, I could feel the excitement emanating from her as people couldn't stop gushing about how lovely she looked. At that moment, I was overcome with pride and love for my daughter. One of the memories I will always cherish is seeing her there, taking full part in such a momentous occasion. My eyes filled with tears of happiness, and I looked at David, whose face reflected mine. He grinned warmly and proudly as he gazed at Katie, obviously moved by her presence and her luminous personality. David approached her as she arrived at the front and knelt down to offer her a warm embrace. Their heartfelt moment together revealed a lot about their strong relationship. After ensuring she was comfortable and able to participate in the ceremony from the front row, he assisted her in positioning herself to the side. Amelia started walking down the aisle a short while later. As she made her way to the altar, she was undoubtedly stunning in her wedding gown. I couldn't help but notice that she looked at Katie for a moment. I briefly hoped that she might smile at my daughter, showing some appreciation for her presence and the part she played in this significant day. However, without even a faint grin, Amelia gazed past Katie and rolled her eyes visibly. It was impossible for me not to feel disappointed. Nevertheless, I decided to ignore the idea because I didn't want anything to ruin the day's happiness. I was ecstatic for my brother when David and Amelia exchanged vows and the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Nothing else mattered at that time since he had at last found someone with whom to share his life. His happiness filled my heart with pride and happiness. We got together as a family for photos during the photo session following the ceremony. David made sure Katie was in every photo we took, and the love and solidarity we all had that day were captured in a ton of images. I couldn't help but notice that Amelia seemed a little strange during the photo shoot. I initially assumed that she was simply weary because she kept huffing and moaning heavily. Weddings are tiring, so perhaps she just needed a respite from shooting so many pictures. However, her behavior got more difficult to ignore as the session went on. Amelia's expression changed considerably as David took Katie up and held her in his arms for a photo. Her eyes were fixed on them, and she had a dissatisfied smile that wavered. Though subtle, it was obvious enough to unnerve me. Amelia approached me after we had taken a number of shots with Katie, asking if I could wheel her out so she could take some pictures with her family alone. Her tone was courteous but short. I was surprised by the request, but I granted it. Katie and I went to the reception to sit with my parents. I was fortunate to have a daughter like her, my mother said, acknowledging my daughter's beauty. Although it was a little gesture, I was pleased to see my mother overcoming her prejudices and coming to terms with my daughter's identity. What mattered most to me was that Katie appeared to have had a pleasant day overall, blissfully ignorant of any strain. From the photos and anecdotes David shared on social media, it appeared that Amelia and David were having a great time on their honeymoon after the wedding. He deserved to savor this unique moment with his new bride, therefore I was pleased for him. After they got back from their honeymoon, David asked Roger, our parents, and me to lunch at his new house. Since we hadn't actually spoken much since the wedding, I was excited to see him again at what was supposed to be a laid-back family get-together. My mom and I have reunited in a surprising way since the wedding. She had taken the time to fully apologize to me for her remarks about Katie and her encouragement to try for another child years prior. She was truly sorry, and even though I was still wary, I was glad that she had acknowledged the hurt her remarks had caused. When David saw Katie again during lunch, he was ecstatic. He enthusiastically produced a selection of presents he had brought back for her from their honeymoon as soon as we got to his house. He had obviously given each one much consideration, and when Katie opened them, her face glowed with delight. As usual, David was totally absorbed in her, asking her about her favorite aspect of the wedding and told her how much everyone had been praising her for her involvement. She was beaming from ear to ear. He often expressed his pride in her, telling her that friends and family had called him to tell him how well Katie had done after the wedding. Katie was so proud to hear all of these praises, and her eyes were sparkling with joy. But I couldn't help but observe Amelia as my brother showered Katie with love. I kept a tight eye on her, and it became clear to me that she was not feeling as excited as David. She didn't even recognize Katie, let alone smile. Rather, she appeared clearly irritated, as though David's conversation with Katie had somehow annoyed her. Her face was a mixture of frustration and anger, and she hardly spoke to anyone while David concentrated on Katie. She seemed to be eager for the moment to end so that he would stop focusing on my daughter. Naturally, David was totally unaware of his wife's behavior. As a family, we relaxed and chatted in the living room after lunch. Amelia approached me at that moment and subtly requested that we speak in private. I already knew what was about to happen, so I felt a knot form in my gut. Since the wedding day, I had been preparing for this discussion. I nodded in agreement, bracing myself for what I knew would be a challenging conversation. We sat down to chat after Amelia showed me to one of the bedrooms. She began by praising me for doing a fantastic job with Katie, meeting all of her requirements, and honoring my promise about how Katie would look at the wedding. I thanked her and nodded, explaining that it was her special day and I wanted to show her respect. After a moment, she said that although she valued my work, she had been bothered by something ever since the wedding. My heart fell. Amelia brought up the wedding pictures on her phone and browsed through the photographer's selection. I came across pictures of David, Amelia, Katie, myself, and the other family members all grinning and savoring the time spent together. Her tone became icy as she paused on a single image and gestured at it. She said, "Look at this," as she enlarged the picture. We were all grinning and looking content in one of the family pictures, with Katie in her wheelchair next to David. Katie gave me a disdainful look as Amelia's finger lingered over her. Her voice was piercing and poisonous as she asked, "Do you see how your stupid kid in a wheelchair is ruining the vibe of the entire picture?" I had trouble breathing for a while. I was stunned. How could she have spoken about my daughter in such a callous and nasty way? I was instantly filled with rage. It was intolerable that my darling daughter, who had done her best to join in the festivities, was now being held responsible for spoiling the mood. I retorted, reminding Amelia that she was aware from the beginning that Katie was in a wheelchair and that she had no right to talk about Katie in that manner. My daughter had no choice but to pose for pictures. How else could she have possibly participated? I responded. Despite my arguments, Amelia sneered and said, "That's not my problem," adding that seeing Katie's wheelchair in every photograph was an eyesore that had made it difficult for her to see the wedding photos. She went on to say that I ought to compensate her for allowing my daughter to ruin her wedding, as if that weren't enough. Her arrogance horrified me. I was so surprised that she would make such an absurd demand that I raised my voice and asked her what sort of compensation she was even referring to. Amelia hit me with her actual demand at that point. According to her, I would have to hire a photo editor to either remove Katie from the wedding shots or, at the absolute least, make her appear to be wheelchair-free. I let out an incredulous gasp. How could she possibly believe it was okay to remove my kid from the wedding pictures or change her identity for the sake of appearance? This was the tipping point. I was at my breaking point. "Are you serious?" I yelled, my voice full of incredulity. "You want me to pay someone to erase my daughter or pretend she isn't in a wheelchair? You're an a-hole, Amelia. I am proud of my daughter exactly the way she is, and I will not be paying for any kind of Photoshop. If you had such a problem with her being part of the wedding, then you should have never let her be the flower girl in the first place." Amelia countered by claiming that although she had done everything in her power to stop David from allowing Katie to be their flower girl, he could not agree because his love for her was so blind. She told me that she was aware that he would have called off the wedding if she had persisted on not inviting my daughter. When I discovered that this woman had been so bitter about Katie, I shook my head. I was shocked by the callousness and heartlessness of her logic. I sternly reprimanded her, telling her that my kid was a real person with feelings and didn't deserve to be hated in this manner. She had been truly thrilled to attend their wedding because she liked her uncle. Now that Amelia was my sister-in-law, she certainly didn't deserve to be treated this way. Amelia, however, seemed unconcerned. She countered by claiming that Katie and I were both attention seekers and that I should remember that Katie's disability was the sole reason people had taken such an interest in her during the wedding. Something inside of me exploded at the disgustingness of her comments. My long simmering anger suddenly erupted, and I slapped Amelia before I really realized what I was doing. The silence of the room reverberated with the sound of my palm touching her face. My hand was shaking as I stood there, and the weight of everything that had just transpired was heaving in my chest. Amelia's eyes widened incredulously, and her cheeks turned scarlet with horror. My brother, my husband, and my parents stormed into the room before she could react. Amelia was questioned by my brother about whether or not she meant what she had said about Katie. Amelia's eyes grew wide with insight. As it happens, David had been listening in on our entire talk and had probably heard all of her nasty and deceptive comments. Her face lit up with panic, and she made a desperate attempt to retract her statement, fumbling over her words. However, it was too late. David's voice filled the room as he screamed at her, accusing her of being arrogant and cunning for dragging me aside to discuss my daughter in such a manner. His voice was a mix of grief and rage as he said, "I can't believe you manipulated me into thinking you were a nice person when in reality you hate my family this much." He was clearly seeing Amelia for who she truly was, someone who had concealed her actual sentiments all along, and the displeasure in his tone was evident. Desperate to save face, Amelia attempted to counter the argument. As she spoke, her voice wavered. "I don't hate your family exactly. This is just about Katie," she added. Then, in an attempt to change the subject, she accused David of constantly giving preference to Katie over everyone else because he felt sorry for her due to her disability. She asserted that he should stop giving Katie so much attention and instead concentrate on their marriage because she was his wife and should receive more of his attention. Then, feeling embarrassed, Amelia started to gripe about how inviting Katie had caused some of her friends to subsequently make fun of her wedding photos. According to her, this is why she wanted to remove Katie from the pictures in Photoshop so she could always remember their lovely day free of such ugliness. David, fortunately, wasn't having it. He advised her to quit being so arrogant and to stop acting as though his niece might have ruined their photos. He claimed that her presence enhanced the beauty of the photos. "I love Katie like my own daughter," he stated. "Giving attention to her doesn't take away anything from you. The fact that I even have to explain this goes to show how cheap your mentality is. Katie is part of my family, and if you hate her this much, then I can't be married to you." When David's comments struck Amelia, her face became white. He gave her a clear look that made it clear he wasn't going to overlook this. "You're an ableist," he continued, repeating what I had said before. "The fact that you continue to justify your behavior means that you will never change. I do not want to be married to a cruel woman like you. Pack up your things and go back to your parents' place." Still in disbelief, Amelia attempted to protest again, but my mother, who had been silent until now, finally interrupted, clearly furious. She was upset at the circumstance, stating that although it was one thing to not enjoy the attention Katie got at the wedding, it was cruel to think of removing her from the photos. My mother informed Amelia that she should feel ashamed of herself for ever bringing up the subject, and she firmly expressed her support for David's choice. Amelia realized she had nothing left to stand on after hearing my mother's defense and witnessing David's uncompromising position. My husband appeared enraged, and I have no doubt that he would have physically assaulted Amelia for saying such awful things about our kid if she hadn't been my brother's wife at the time. Her actual nature had been exposed for everyone to see, and Amelia was outnumbered. She reluctantly left the house with only her phone and car keys because she had no other option. I was grateful that David stood up for Katie, but he later apologized to Roger and me for what his wife had said about our daughter. He has nothing to do with this. Probably after Amelia had gone to them in tears, Amelia's parents called David and my parents that evening to talk more about the matter. But David had asked for a break so he could calm himself and consider the situation. Amelia has been messaging me ever since the incident, essentially accusing me of causing friction between her and David. She believes that by agreeing to pay for a photo editor, I could have easily resolved their problems. Naturally, I don't want to be the reason my brother's marriage fails, but I also can't forgive what Amelia said to me about my kid. Update 1. I can't respond to everyone because I'm getting so many DMs and comments. I shall therefore make all the points clear here. Amelia was aware of Katie's friendship with my brother because she had previously met her. However, it appeared that she had been able to hide her contempt for my daughter for a long time. I had never had the slightest suspicion that she truly detested my kid to this extent. We try our best to make Katie feel as normal as possible so she doesn't feel like she is being treated differently because of her impairment, but I recognize that some people may find it awkward to see a child in a wheelchair, especially during a wedding. Regardless of the fact that Katie is in a wheelchair, I am sure that people would still find her attractive. She has her dad's blonde hair and blue eyes. Amelia was obviously merely attempting to point out my daughter's flaws out of jealousy. Katie's godfather is my brother. This is because I know that my husband will support my daughter no matter what happens to us. He is extremely protective of Katie since he loves her like his own daughter. It must have felt like a total betrayal to him to hear Amelia's statements and realize her actual intentions toward my daughter. Since Katie was absorbed in her cartoons, I doubt she heard anything Amelia and I said. She would have undoubtedly questioned me later if she had. Update 2. In case you were wondering, my brother is having his wedding revoked. My brother and his attorney are adamant that Katie lied to him from the beginning and tricked him into believing she would get along with his family when she wouldn't. Amelia panicked and tried desperately to keep her marriage intact when she realized that David was truly serious about leaving her. She made a pathetic attempt to apologize to me, but it was obvious to me that her words were not sincere. She wasn't prepared to accept responsibility for her actions or show true regret. Knowing that her apologies was merely a ruse to deflect criticism from herself, I was unable to accept it. Her rage was only increased by this. She became angry with me right away and accused me of destroying my brother's life. It seemed as though I was the cause of all her issues instead of the results of her own decisions. She accused me of being the one who made my brother leave her when he could have been content with her. As if that weren't enough, Amelia's parents also contacted my parents in an effort to place the responsibility for their daughter's struggles on Katie and me. Fortunately, my parents have denied this unjust claim. In particular, my dad expressed his disappointment, telling them that he is glad she will no longer be a part of our family and that they should be embarrassed of the daughter they raised. The fact that my family has supported Katie and me over this entire ordeal makes me really proud. I did apologize to my brother for what he was going through with Amelia when we spoke. He convinced me that knowing the truth about her now was preferable to later, when she may have said or done something more hurtful in front of Katie. I absolutely concur, and I'm relieved that we are also successfully removing Amelia from our lives. Update 3. My previous update was 4 months ago. For those who are curious, my brother is no longer married to Amelia after formally annulling their union. Everyone reacted negatively to Amelia after the truth about their failing marriage was made public. Eventually, she apologized to me, but I just blocked her without answering. We all had a vacation together not long ago. We had an amazing time together. I'm really happy that David and Katie still have such a wonderful connection. I'm thankful that the entire ordeal has only made our family ties stronger. After my husband gave his mother a key to our home and helped her destroy my life, I exposed their lies with the police at my doorstep. When I opened my front door, I didn't notice the strewn documents or the toppled furniture right away. It was the quietness, that oppressive, strange hush that envelops you like a veil of death and whispers that something is gravely amiss. My name is Audrey, and I recently attended a 3-day business retreat where I learned how to trust my coworkers through absurd team-building activities. Now that I'm standing in my cluttered living room, I see that I should have prioritized trusting my own family more. As I called Ryan's phone, my fingers were shaking. Voicemail's recognizable click is heard after 1 or 2 rings. Naturally, my beloved husband was most likely at his mother's place, acting as though he had no idea why his wife had called. "Ryan, someone broke into the house. The safe is open, call me back immediately." I cataloged the damage as I wandered through the wreckage of my home. The couch cushions were cut open, drawers were pulled out and emptied, and picture frames were placed face down. However, they hadn't been searching for cash or valuables. This was personal, no. My grandmother's letters, the only remnants of her that I still possessed, were the first thing they targeted. It buzzed on my phone. Not Ryan. Evan at work. He inquired, "How's the drive back?" "Someone broke into my house," I said, shaking my voice. "The safe." They knew the combination. "Jesus, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I tossed away a ripped magazine and said, "No. I know exactly who did this. Helen's fingerprints are all over this mess. She's been trying to get those letters for months." "Your mother-in-law? Why would she?" I arrived at the kitchen, where all the cabinets were empty, and said, "Because she can't stand that Ryan married someone who won't bow to her every whim. She thinks those letters prove my grandmother's family wronged hers decades ago, some ancient real estate dispute she won't let die." When Evan said, "Call the police." "And tell them what?" "That my mother-in-law used a key my husband probably gave her to steal family documents. That my sister-in-law probably helped because she's bitter about her divorce and wants to hurt someone else's marriage." Though it sounded empty, I chuckled. "They're too smart for that. They'll say Ryan gave them permission. It'll be my word against the entire Miller family." The door to the basement was ajar. I had not yet looked down there. "I have to go, Evan. I need to see what else they took." "Audrey, wait." After hanging up, I went down the stairs. My feet creaked with every stride. More mayhem was shown when the basement light flicked on. However, I noticed a tiny piece of paper stuck behind a toppled box. I managed to liberate it. It was a 3-day-old receipt for a duplicate key from the hardware store. Once more, my phone buzzed. "Ryan." Before I could say anything, he inquired, "Where are you?" "At Mom's," it was his words. "Listen, Audrey, I can explain." "Did you give her a key?" "Quiet." "Afterwards." "She just wanted to look for some old family photos while you were away. I didn't think." You never do think when it comes to her, do you? I clenched my fist around the receipt. Those letters were all I had left of my grandmother, Ryan. The only things that were truly mine. We can talk about this when I get home. No. The word was piercing enough to pierce. We'll talk about this in front of everyone. I'm coming over there right now. And Ryan, tell your mother to prepare for war. After hanging up, I stood in my basement, surrounded by the ruins of faith. Like everyone else in their lives, they believed they could break me and force me to submit to their authority. However, they were unaware of what they had just begun. Sometimes the opponent who knows how to hit back harder is more dangerous than the one who hits first. My skin crawled when I saw Helen's immaculate living room. While my house was in ruins across town, everything else was in its proper place, not even a cushion out of place. Helen's interpretation of reality was depicted through the carefully chosen family images on her walls, which conveyed the story of Ryan and Chloe's early years. There aren't any photos of my wedding day in them. Helen poured tea into exquisite cups, her voice dripping with honeyed, delicious poison. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said. Ryan gave me permission to look for old family albums while you were away, nothing more. With her arms folded and her wedding ring noticeably missing, Chloe sat next to her mother. You're being hysterical, Audrey, as usual. I put the receipt from the hardware store on the coffee table. Funny how you needed a new key made 3 days ago. Planning ahead? Eyes flitting between his mother and myself, Ryan shifted in his seat and said, maybe we should all calm down. Oh, we're very calm, I remarked as I observed Helen's immaculately manicured fingers encircling her teacup. Just like we were calm last Christmas when you went through my phone while I was sleeping. Or last month, when you showed up unannounced at my office to check on me. When Helen said, I worry about my son. Someone needs to look out for his interests. His interests? I laughed till my throat ached from the broken glass. Or yours. Mother was right about you from the start. Chloe's eyes shone as she leaned forward. You never understood our family, always keeping secrets, hiding things in that safe of yours. Those letters belong to my grandmother. Letters that prove your family cheated ours 60 years ago. Helen's mask broke. That property should have been ours. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she, Ryan warned, but it was too late. Slowly, the pieces clicked into place as I stood up. So you admit you took them? Helen's face suddenly became smoother. I admitted nothing. And you have no proof. With my hand hovering over the record button, I took out my phone and said, you're right. But I will. Ryan, are you coming home or staying here? He glanced at his mother, then at me, constantly conflicted, always taking the easy route. I think maybe we all need space to cool off. I paused to glance back at Helen before making my way to the door, saying, wrong answer. You know what's funny? Those letters you stole? They're not even the originals. Just copies I kept as decoys. Grandmother taught me well. Always keep what matters most where manipulative people can't reach it. The clatter of Helen's teacup against its saucer was heard. You're lying. I asked. Am I? Guess you'll have to wonder about that, along with what else I might have hidden away. I looked into Ryan's eyes. Don't bother coming home tonight, or maybe ever. He started to get up, but Chloe grabbed his arm and said, Audrey, wait. She urged. Let her go. She's just trying to manipulate you, like always. I left Helen's well-organized world behind and made my way to my car. I held the steering wheel with trembling hands, but not because of terror. As I had previously stated, the originals were secure because they had been kept in a safety deposit box ever since I married Ryan and seen Helen's hunger when Grandma's letters were brought up during the wedding. It buzzed on my phone. Evan once more. He inquired, how bad was it? They fell for the ruse. Helen essentially admitted it. I started the engine, but I have another task for you. Remember that security system you installed at your lake house? The one with the hidden cameras? Yeah, why? Because I'm done playing defense. They want to go through my things. Let's make sure we catch them in the act next time. As I backed away, I noticed Helen's house become smaller in my rearview mirror. And Evan, thank you for being the one person in my life who actually listens. Always. But Audrey, just be careful. People like that, they're most dangerous when they're cornered. With plans already racing through my head, I hung up the phone. Helen believed she knew everything there was to know about me. She understood me well. She had overlooked one important fact, though. I had observed her influence everyone for 3 years. It was time to apply the principles I had acquired from the greatest. Although it wasn't my typical location, the coffee shop across from Helen's preferred hairdresser offered me the ideal view. After 2 hours of observing, Evan moved into the seat across from me and pushed a brand new cup in my direction. His words, "The cameras are set up. Motion sensors, night vision, everything feeding directly to your phone. But are you sure about this?" I gestured to the window of the salon where Helen and Chloe were sitting, receiving their weekly manicures. I hit the play button on my phone and said, "Listen." During our confrontation, the bug I had placed in Helen's handbag allowed me to hear their voices well. Helen was stating, "We need those original letters. That safety deposit box has to be at her bank downtown." "Ryan says she's been going through their financial records," said Chloe. "Probably planning to divorce him and take everything." She yelled, "Over my dead body, Helen. I didn't spend 30 years building this family's reputation to have her destroy it. We're going back to the house tomorrow while she's at work. There has to be something we can use against her." I put an end to the recording. "Still think I'm paranoid?" Evan's expression stiffened. "We should take this to the police and tell them?" I put my hands around the steaming cup and said, "And tell them what? That my mother-in-law is planning to rob me? They'll say it's a family matter. Besides, I want more than just stopping them. I want them to face consequences for once in their privileged lives." It buzzed on my phone. "Ryan. I'm calling once more. For the third time today." I turned it down. "He's been sleeping at their house," I said. "Probably plotting with them, trying to figure out where the originals are. Or maybe he's worried about you." My coffee tasted unpleasant, so I said, "Then he should have worried before giving them a key to our house. Before choosing them over me again." Ryan texted, "Come home, please. We must speak." "Home?" I whispered. "Like that means anything anymore?" Evan bent over. "Audrey, I know you're hurt, but..." The entrance of the salon chimed. Helen and Chloe came out with shiny new manicures. Helen stopped and stared straight into the coffee shop window as they made their way to her Mercedes. I remained motionless, unable to breathe. Her mouth formed the sly smirk I had come to despise. She was aware that I was observing. I said, "Time to go," and suddenly stood up. "They'll be at my house tomorrow at 10 o'clock, according to their usual schedule. That's when we'll catch them." Evan's eyebrows went up. "I thought you wanted to handle this yourself." "I did. I do." I collected my belongings, my hands trembling a little. "I can't face them alone anymore. I need someone in my corner. Always." He lightly touched my arm. "Just promise me something. Don't let revenge consume you. I've seen what it does to people." As I watched Helen's car drive away, I thought back to our wedding reception, when she had cornered me in the restroom and first revealed her true nature. "You'll never be good enough for this family," she'd stated. "One day, Ryan will realize that." I informed Evan, "This isn't about retaliation. It's about justice. And maybe saving Ryan from them, even if he doesn't want to be saved." Once more, my phone buzzed. A message from an unidentified number. When I opened it, my blood froze. "Found something interesting in your grandmother's old law firm records. Tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone, or Ryan learns everything about the Anderson case." Evan saw my face. "What's wrong?" With my thoughts racing, I closed the message. My grandmother's greatest regret, the secret she carried to her grave, and the true cause of Helen's animosity toward our family was the Anderson case. "Nothing," I pretended to smile. "Just work stuff. I should go prepare for tomorrow." But Helen's comments from 3 years ago kept repeating in my mind as I made my way to my car. "Ryan will understand it one day." Perhaps she was correct. Perhaps he would tomorrow. Perhaps it was time for him to do so. At lunchtime, Riverside Park appeared different, somehow cooler. Holding a manila envelope containing ammunition for whatever game Helen was playing, I sat on a bench. The case files of Anderson. Decades ago, my grandma had sealed them away. In my hands now, they were a weapon. A shadow landed on my lap. "Not Helen. Ryan." "My mother told me everything," he claimed. He sat next to me, keeping a safe distance from me. "About the Anderson case. About what your grandmother did to our family." It felt like a heavier envelope. "Did she tell you how your grandfather tried to blackmail mine? How he threatened to destroy their law firm unless they gave him that property?" "That's not," he paused, face rubbing. "She said you'd try to twist things, like she twisted you." I looked over at him. "When did you give her the safe combination, Ryan?" His silence was sufficient response. I went on. "The day after our wedding. When she convinced you I was hiding something. That's why you've been checking our bank statements, right? Looking for evidence I'm stealing from you." I was protecting our family. Our family? I laughed, but my voice didn't sound like it. There is no our family. There's only ever been yours. It buzzed on my phone. Regarding the cameras he had set, Evan was messaging. Everything was prepared for the trap of tomorrow. All of a sudden, though, it felt empty. She's using you, I whispered. She always has. And you let her, because it's easier than standing up to her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I dropped the envelope on his lap and stood up. Here. The precious Anderson case files. Proof that your grandfather was the one who committed fraud, not mine. Proof that your mother's been lying all these years. He gazed intently at the envelope. How did you get them? From my grandmother's old partner. Turns out, he's been waiting years for someone to finally expose the truth. I took a step back. But you know what? Keep them. Burn them. Give them to Helen. I don't care anymore. Audrey, wait. I filed for divorce yesterday. The words hung like broken glass between us. Ryan's face turned white. You what? Check your email. The papers should arrive today. Now my hands were steady. I'm done being the villain in Helen's story. Done watching you choose them over me. Done pretending we have a marriage worth saving. He approached me as he rose up and said, we can fix this. I'll talk to Mother. That's exactly the problem, I said, stepping back from his contact. Your first instinct is still to run to her. It always will be. Once more my phone buzzed. This time, Helen. Where are you? We had a deal. I returned the type. The deal has changed. Inquire about the files with Ryan. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage, Ryan stated. I started to go, but stopped when I heard. You already did that when you gave them the key to our house. You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought I could save you from them. But you don't want to be saved. Audrey. Goodbye, Ryan. I passed the seat where we used to have Sunday lunches and the location where he had proposed as I strolled through the park. Helen, Ryan, and even Chloe were all buzzing on my phone. I made them all quiet. Only Evan's message was received. The cameras are in real time. Do you still intend to carry out tomorrow's plan? At the park's exit, I paused and took one final glance back. Ryan appeared disoriented as he stood where I had left him, holding the package tightly. My determination faltered for a second. Then I recalled the broken safe, the broken house, and the 3 years of gaslighting and deceptive tactics. Yes, I did reply to the text. However, plans changed. I no longer only wished to catch them in the act. What are you looking for? I observed as Ryan, who was constantly rushing back to Mother, took out his phone and most likely called Helen. I typed, I want to destroy them, each and every one. Because sometimes destroying everything and starting anew is the only way to save yourself. I was sitting in my car across the street when the security camera feed flashed on my laptop screen. Helen's typical Thursday morning interruption is 10 minutes away. Every aspect of my property, including the front and back doors as well as the garden walk Helen loved to criticize, was caught by Evan's intricate setup. From the passenger seat, Evan said, you don't have to watch this. We can just let the cameras record. My coffee cup made my fingers whiten. I need to see it. Need to know exactly how they do it. Helen's Mercedes smoothly came to a stop in front of my house on time. Chloe followed her out, as always immaculately styled. Then a third door opened, and Ryan appeared. In my hands, the coffee cup crumbled. He is assisting them. They went to the main door. Ryan looked over his shoulder anxiously. Helen gestured angrily as she spoke. He produced his original key, not the duplicate. Jesus, whispered Evan. Audrey, maybe we should wait. As a fourth figure stepped out of Helen's car, I took hold of his arm. Who is that? With a briefcase in hand, the man in the pricey suit walked with authority. Somehow, he looked familiar. That's James Morton, Evan announced. Helen's lawyer. I've seen him at charity events. The group vanished within my home. I flipped between camera angles, seeing them navigate places with unsettling resemblance. Helen led them as a general would lead soldiers. She said, the study, clearly audible over the covert microphones. Those Anderson files have to be here somewhere. Mother, added her. She said she gave them to me. Ryan made a feeble protest. Copies, obviously. Helen yelled, you think your wife would give up her only leverage? Search everything. Once more I saw them tearing up my house. However, things were different this time. This time, I noticed that Ryan was opening drawers with trembling hands. As Chloe knocked books from the shelves, I noticed her smug smile. I witnessed Helen's disguise come off when she believed no one was looking, exposing her true desperation. Morton said. Behind the safe, without warning. Did you check behind it? I gasped. The safe on the wall had been a ruse. There was nothing back there, but everyone was aware of it. Too soon, Ryan answered. No, there's nothing back there. Helen squinted her eyes. Move it, mother, move it. My fingers hovered above 911 as I reached for my phone. The prior owner had installed a secret compartment behind that safe. There were documents within that showed Helen's own financial misdeeds, which were considerably more devastating than the Anderson case. Compiled with care over 3 years of observation and anticipation. Ryan took a step forward, then halted. No, he replied. Helen turned against him asking, What did you say? I said no, he said more firmly. This ends now. We're leaving. Helen's composure broke when she asked, After everything I've done for you? That woman has poisoned you against your own family, Ryan remarked. That woman is my wife. Not anymore, Morton cut in with ease. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. You have no legal right to. With my phone filming everything, I walked into the doorway and asked, to prevent us from? Breaking and entering, destruction of property, conspiracy. With the exception of Helen, they all froze like guilty kids. She flashed her sly smile. Perfect timing, dear, we were just discussing the Anderson case and other family matters. I walked deeper into the room with Evan right behind me and said, I can see that. But you made one mistake, Helen. You got sloppy. Desperate. She responded, I don't know what you mean. As her voice became more strained. The Anderson case was never about property fraud, was it? It was about covering up what really happened. What you did. Her smile faltered. You're confused. Adding, the real documents aren't behind that safe. I looked into Ryan's astonished eyes and said, they're already with the district attorney. Along with proof that your mother embezzled millions from her own charity foundation. That's why she's so desperate to find evidence against my family, to protect herself. Chaos ensued in the room. Ryan stood motionless between them all as Helen reached for her lawyer and Chloe began to scream. However, I continued to watch Helen as her idyllic environment fell apart. Retaliation isn't always about ruining someone. Allowing them to ruin themselves is sometimes the solution. And sometimes speaking the truth is enough to bring about justice. My living area was painted in alternating shades of blue and red by the police lights. As she talked to the authorities, Helen sat primly on the couch, tears running down her flawlessly applied face. She pointed to me and wept. She's the one who's been hurting our family. I was just trying to protect my son. We have evidence of her harassment, Morton said with ease. Her obsession with destroying her mother-in-law's reputation. The break-in was merely an attempt to recover documents that rightfully belonged to the family. The recording of their entrance was no longer useful, and my phone felt heavy in my pocket. Like Helen always did, they had gone ahead of me and completely changed the situation. That isn't true, Ryan exclaimed abruptly. Everybody looked at him. Mother, stop, just stop. Helen's weeping stopped at once. Ryan, dear, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He moved away from her and in my direction, but I retreated. Too late, too little. The embezzlement accusations, they're true, aren't they? Asked Ryan. That's why you've been so desperate to destroy Audrey's family's reputation, to cover your tracks. Everything I did was for this family, Helen stated. Her mask fell off entirely. She pointed a finger at me and threatened to destroy everything. That money secured your future, your sister's future, she said. The officers looked at each other. He heard someone talking into his radio. Mrs. Helen Miller, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here, she said to Morton, her attorney. Do something. Morton, meanwhile, was already moving in the direction of the entrance. I think our professional relationship has concluded, Helen, given the circumstances. After that, everything occurred pretty fast. As they led her away, Helen wailed and Chloe followed, complaining about loyalty to her family. The evidence I had acquired was being gathered, recorded, and labeled when Morton escaped during the confusion. Audrey, said Ryan. Don't, I said, putting my arms over myself as I felt icy. Just don't. I didn't know about the charity money, about any of it, I swear. I said, but you knew about the break-ins, the harassment, the lies, and my voice broke. You chose them. Every single time, you chose them. I can fix this? I pointed at our demolished house and said, fix what? My grandmother's letters are still gone. Our marriage is over. Your mother's going to jail. What exactly can you fix? There was Evan in the doorway. Audrey, the detective needs your statement. Ryan grabbed me by the arm as I tried to pursue him. I love you, he shouted frantically. Isn't that worth something? I remembered every touch, every promise, and every instance when I felt like we were actually creating something as I gazed at his hand on my arm. Then I recalled the last time I saw him pick his mother's falsehoods above my reality, helping them break into our house. I whispered, love without trust isn't love. It's just another form of control. He was standing in the ruins of our life together as I withdrew. The detective waited while filling out more paperwork and asking additional questions. I spent hours describing how I had discovered proof of Helen's embezzlement, how I had recorded her harassment, and how I had seen my marriage gradually deteriorate due to deceit and manipulation. Later, when I was by myself in my car, I took out my grandmother's final letter, not the one Helen had taken, but the authentic one. The one I'd held dear for years. Remember, dear heart, she'd wrote. Sometimes winning means walking away. Sometimes the greatest victory is in refusing to play their game at all. Ryan again buzzed on my phone. I turned off the phone and turned on the engine. He was standing in the doorway of what had been our house, looking lost, and I could see him in the rearview mirror. My heart grieved for a second, but as I drove away, I came to a realization. I had nearly turned into Helen in my attempt to destroy her. Manipulative, control-obsessed, and prepared to give anything up for success. My grandma had been correct. Taking down Helen wasn't the true victory. It was in releasing myself at last. The corridor of the courthouse was cold and long. While waiting for Helen's arraignment, I watched from a rough wooden seat while her society pals whispered to one another. They were still in shock that the president of their charitable board was being charged with embezzlement 3 weeks after the break-in. With black circles under his eyes, Ryan emerged at the end of the hallway. With her eyes like daggers, Chloe held onto his arm. I pretended to read emails while concentrating on my phone. His voice was closer than I thought. Audrey. Can we talk? I stated, the divorce papers are with your lawyer, without raising my gaze. Just sign them. He sat next to me, too near, and said, that's not. Mother wants to make a deal now. I gave him a look. A deal? If you drop the charges, she'll return all of your grandmother's letters. Bitter than coffee grinds, a giggle erupted. You don't understand, do you? All that matters is that she is still my mother, isn't that right? She made mistakes despite everything she did and everything she stole, so I stood, seeking space. Errors? She terrorized me in my own home, stole millions from her own charity, and methodically destroyed our marriage, I said, turning heads. Ryan, those aren't errors. They are options. Ryan was beckoned by Helen's smile, but before he could react, the doors of the courthouse sprang open, and Evan hurried in with a manila packet in his hand. Breathing heavily, he replied, I found it in Morton's office. With shaky fingers, I opened the envelope to reveal a single document, a letter from Helen to her lawyer dated 3 years prior to my wedding. What is that? Did Ryan ask? I looked through the contents and remarked, insurance. Just in case I ever threatened to take control of you. Helen had orchestrated this whole thing from the start, the harassment, the break-ins, everything, to make me appear crazy and fixated on the Anderson case, so I looked up as she came in handcuffed and accompanied by officers. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in Helen's eyes as they fixed themselves on the letter. Where did that come from? She insisted. I held up the letter and said, Helen, you documented everything. Your lawyer isn't as loyal as you thought. Every stage of your scheme to ruin me. Everyone will now be fully aware of your identity. She rushed forward, but the officers stopped her. You ungrateful little, she said. Stop, Mom. Ryan positioned himself between us and said, stop. Everything I did was for you, to protect you from her. Helen said, her face crushed. From where? Ryan's voice broke. From emotion? From a life that is beyond your control? She never loved you like I do. Helen said, her eyes hardening. No, I cut him off. I loved him enough to let him make his own decisions. You loved him enough to make sure he never could. The murmurs surrounding us became more intense. Chloe turned away from her mother, finally realizing the truth she had helped facilitate, and Helen's friends stared in horror as their ideal society matron broke before their own eyes. Evan whispered, the arraignment's starting. The district attorney had been quietly waiting nearby, so I gave him the letter before turning to Ryan one more time. I did love you, I replied. But love shouldn't hurt like this. Audrey, please. Goodbye, Ryan. As Helen was escorted into the courtroom, I turned to leave, her well-planned world crumbling in my wake. My grandmother's former legal partner texted me, saying, "I found something in the archives. Your grandmother would be proud." My phone rang. The autumn air outside was crisp and clean, and Evan caught up to me at the bottom of the steps leading to the courthouse. "You all right?" he inquired. As the wind pulled the leaves away from their limbs, I saw them strewn all over the sidewalk. Sincerely, I replied, "No, but I will be." Because sometimes defeating your adversaries isn't the only way to win. Refusing to allow them to ruin you is sometimes the key. And sometimes the best form of retaliation is just to walk away with your head held high, and let them deal with the fallout from their own decisions. In contrast to the suburban gloom I had left behind, the lights of downtown glittered through the window as the final box from my previous life stood unopened on the floor of my new apartment. Helen's carefully constructed reputation was shattered like a dropped teacup, and the society pages were already humming with scandal when Evan texted me about her sentencing, 5 years for embezzlement. Ryan was standing in the hallway with a familiar leather-bound bundle, and I froze when I heard a knock at the door. I recognized the pattern. 3 rapid taps, 1 slow. I said, "Grandmother's letters," with a constricted throat. He held them out as a peace gift and explained, "I found them in Mother's study while cleaning out the house. They were always yours." I took the bundle and traced the tattered edges with my fingers. "How is she?" He shrugged, saying, "Angry, bitter. She's in therapy. She claims to be beginning to comprehend certain aspects of our family. Along with you. Gaining the ability to stand alone." A painting and easel stood by the window, the canvas half covered in bold strokes of red and gold, something I'd discovered by mistake, a means to pour forth all words couldn't describe. He looked beyond me into the flat. "Simply, it helps," I said. "Audrey, I don't." As I moved away, I said, "We both know why it ended." "I understand. You should see," he said, bringing out an envelope containing the signed divorce papers and other items. It contained a 30-year-old newspaper clipping about a young Helen Miller who was frantically attempting to establish her social standing before marrying into a wealthy family. Ryan remarked softly. "She was constantly terrified of losing control, of being shown to be inadequate. I now understand what she did, but I'm not condoning it. Understanding doesn't make it right. No, but it helps me not become her." Somewhere in the metropolis below, a siren screamed. Where I used to cringe at the sound, now it served as a reminder that life moves on, changes, and evolves. I told myself, I never wanted revenge, in shock at the reality. I just wanted to be free. "I understand. You won because of that." He started to walk away but stopped. "The picture. It's stunning." I opened the bundle of letters after he departed, and while my grandmother's words flowed across the pages, describing her strength, her courage to confront bullies, and her courage to choose integrity over retaliation, one piece, written shortly before her death, struck my attention. "Because they are afraid of their own darkness, some people will attempt to dull your light, dear heart. You have more power if you keep shining than if you resist them." Not every story needed a tidy ending, and sometimes victory wasn't in killing or even forgiving your enemies, but rather in finding who you truly were without them. I grabbed up my brush and added blue touches to the canvas. My phone buzzed once more, and Evan was inviting me to dinner. No date yet, but perhaps someday. For the time being, friendship was sufficient, and I had my freedom, my truth, and my work. In my previous life, I would have perceived danger in the shadows created by the flickering city lights, but now I see opportunities, patterns, and untold stories. The canvas was waiting, the night was young, and I picked up another brush. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely free, not because Helen had lost, not because I had won, but because I had finally understood the difference between emancipation and retribution. And I discovered who I was in that disparity. My parents gave my sister a brand new car for Christmas, leaving me with nothing. Until a winning lottery ticket changed everything. The peacefulness of Christmas morning was broken by the sound of laughter and delighted squeals coming up from our driveway. With my coffee mug warming my hands, I stood at the kitchen window and watched my younger sister Tessa hop up and down next to a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle that had a huge silver ribbon on top. With joy on their cheeks, my parents smiled as they gave her the keys. I'm Ella, and I recognized at this point that I would always be the underdog in my family's history. Through the glass, Tessa's voice could be heard. "Oh my God. I can't believe you guys did this." As if it were made of gold, she was already seated in the driver's seat and rubbing her hands over the steering wheel. I looked at my small Christmas presents to everyone, the pile of scratch-off lottery tickets on the counter. They had yet to bother opening them. After investing every available dollar in my culinary school applications, the tickets were the only thing I could afford. However, it would have been useless to try to explain that to my family. They had been rather explicit about what they thought of my pastime. I was shocked to hear my mother say, "Lay?" She was still wearing her coat when she stood in the doorway. "Why aren't you outside with everyone? Come see your sister's car." I made an effort to grin. "Just finishing my coffee, Mom?" With that typical expression of despair, she scowled. "You could try being happy for her, you know. This is a big moment." Before I could stop them, they blurted out, "Right. Because I'm the one who makes everything about myself." When she said, "Don't start. Not today," I watched her go back outside, biting my tongue. My father was demonstrating how Tessa should adjust her mirrors through the window. He was grinning proudly, which is something I never managed to achieve, not when I made the honor roll, when I won the regional cooking competition, or even when I was accepted to culinary school before they refused to cover my tuition. I found myself reaching for the lotto tickets. I began scratching out the numbers on one out of habit, not really noticing until I noticed 3 matched digits. I double-checked the winning combinations, and my heart began beating. $50,000. With trembling palms, I gazed at the ticket. I could pay for culinary school with this money. I could begin constructing the restaurant of my dreams. At last, I could demonstrate to everyone the value of my pastime. However, this ticket was intended to be a present. Giving cash to them and seeing them celebrate another lucky break would be the appropriate thing to do. Cash would likely go into Tessa's education fund or a family vacation that I wouldn't be invited to. My folks chuckled as Tessa playfully honked the horn outside. They hadn't even realized I wasn't there. That's when I decided what to do. I folded the winning ticket carefully and put it in my pocket. I collected the remaining scratch-offs and disposed of them in the recycle bin. What they hadn't bothered to open, they wouldn't miss. "La!" a voice shouted from outside my father's house. "Get out here and take a family picture." As I approached the front door, I stopped and placed my hand on the handle. They were huddled around the automobile, their breath evident in the chilly December air, as I could see through the window. Without me, they appeared to be the ideal family of 3. "Coming," I returned the call. But I went upstairs to my room instead of joining them. Within an hour, I had the winning ticket in my wallet and a laptop open to apartment listings. Sometimes the finest form of retaliation is to leave rather than to get even. And I eventually had my chance because of their forgotten Christmas present. When I unlocked the door to my new flat, the key felt heavy in my hand. A studio above a downtown Thai restaurant wasn't much, but it was mine. My stomach rumbled in spite of everything as the scent of garlic and lemongrass rose through the floorboards. My phone was still blazing with missed calls from home 3 weeks after Christmas. My mother continued to text me, each one more filled with guilt than the last, even after I had left a letter stating that I needed space. "You're being selfish, Lila. Your sister needs you right now." After setting my duffel bag on the exposed mattress in the corner, I began unpacking the few culinary supplies I had packed, including a well-seasoned cast-iron pan, my knife roll, and the necessities. The winning lottery ticket, the funds already set aside for tuition at the culinary school, and the security deposit for this apartment were all securely deposited. I froze when I heard a knock on my door. Had they discovered me somehow? "Hello, new tenant?" It was a strange, highly accented voice. "I'm Marco, from downstairs." A tall man in chef's whites with his salt and pepper hair pulled back in a short ponytail was waiting for me as I opened the door. His blazer bore the moniker Executive Chef. He pointed to my boxes and remarked, "I noticed someone moving in. Wanted to introduce myself. We try to keep a family atmosphere here." I winced when I heard the word family, but his kind grin calmed me. He noticed the knife roll that was visible through my open door. "You cook?" he inquired as he followed my eyes. "I try to. I'm actually starting culinary school next month." His eyes glowed. "No kidding. We're short-staffed downstairs. Could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, even part-time." My phone buzzed once more before I could reply. The name of my father appeared on the screen. Marco noticed my face and said, "Complicated situation?" "You could say that." He gave a contemplative nod. "Listen, come down tomorrow morning if you're interested. Sometimes the best therapy is keeping your hands busy and your knives sharp." I eventually listened to my father's voicemail after he departed. He spoke in a rough, irate tone. "Your mother's upset, and Tessa's grades are slipping. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Time to grow up and come home." After deleting the message, I launched my laptop and navigated to the website of the cooking school. Tuition for the first term was due the following week. I had my finger hovering over the submit payment button when Tessa sent me another text. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Where are you? I'm worried. Compared to the others, this one hurt more. Even if Tessa and I didn't get along, she wasn't to blame for our parents' actions. But she had never been able to hide anything from our parents, so I couldn't risk giving her the truth. I'm safe, I replied by typing. Just need some time. I was in Marco's kitchen the following morning, slicing vegetables with more attention to detail than was necessary. The motion felt familiar and calming. Marco worked next to me, sometimes giving me technique advice. He remarked, "You have good instincts," as he observed me adjusting the heat beneath a boiling sauce. "But you're angry? It shows in your cooking. Is that a bad thing?" He gave a shrug. "Depends what you do with it. Anger can fuel passion or destroy it. The difference is in the control." My mother texted me again, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. I choose to disregard it. Marco went on, trying the sauce with a spoon. "The people who hurt us don't suffer when we let them consume our thoughts. They have no idea. We are the only ones that suffer." I reflected on my silent exit and the lottery ticket. They must occasionally realize that they cannot take people for granted. He gave me the spoon and said, "Maybe, but be careful that your desire for vengeance doesn't become your motivation. Try this." "What is absent?" Thinking, I took a taste of the sauce. "Salt, and perhaps a little acid." He grinned. "Exactly. In both life and cookery, balance is crucial." A server burst through the entrance of the kitchen. "Chef, a woman is outside inquiring about Ella, claims to be her mother." My heart stopped beating. I could see her looking around the dining room through the kitchen window, Tessa following her like a shadow. Marco gave me a curious glance. Silently, he said, "Back door through the alley. But keep in mind that you can't run indefinitely. You must eventually take a firm stance and serve the food you have cooked." I tied my apron as I nodded. The true test was deciding when to stay and fight, not when to flee. After 3 months of culinary school, I felt like I was finally settling in. I seldom had time to think about my family because of my early classes, afternoon jobs at Marco's restaurant, and late evenings designing my own future kitchen. That should have been my first clue that things were going to blow up in my face. As I was getting ready for dinner service, Amelia entered Marco's kitchen. Now a rising star chef at one of the city's best restaurants, my old friend from high school culinary club looked just like I remembered her. Pristine chef's whites, neatly combed hair, and that grin that never quite reached her eyes. She leaned on the prep table and muttered, "Lila Hawkins? I couldn't believe it, but I had heard reports that you were employed here. By now, shouldn't you be managing your own business?" "I'm still learning," I said, continuing to cut vegetables in the steady pattern Marco had shown me. Not all of us were supported by our parents while attending Le Cordon Bleu. "Talking about parents," she added, taking out her phone and browsing through some content. "Last week, I met your mother at the charity dinner. She appeared concerned about you." My finger almost got caught as my knife slipped. "You spoke with my mom? She made a comment about you stealing money and fleeing. Theatrical, even for you." Suddenly, the kitchen felt too small and too hot. "That wasn't the case." "No." Her eyebrows went up. "I know you've been looking at restaurant business plans since I also heard from several investors. Considering that, the timing is intriguing." Now my hands trembled. "Amelia, what do you want?" "Want? All I'm worried about is my old acquaintance. You know, it takes more than simply money to open a business. It requires reputation, relationships, and stability." She underlined the final point. "It would be unfortunate if prospective investors were aware of rumors regarding the true source of your startup funding." Marco's voice exploded from the doorway before I could reply. "Is everything in here all right?" Amelia's smile became incredibly sweet. "Just catching up with a friend from long ago. Chef Marco, I actually came to discuss business. Next month, my restaurant will host a pop-up event with up-and-coming talented artists. Lay's participation would be greatly appreciated." Marco glanced at me, but I was unable to look him in the eye. Decisively, "I'll let her think about it," he stated. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have service to prepare for." I tried to stabilize myself by holding onto the side of the prep table when Amelia left. I muttered, "She's going to tell everyone. The investors, my family." Under his breath, Marco said, "Tell them what?" I told him everything, including the lottery ticket, my escape, and the meticulously planned plans that were now in danger of failing. He gave me a towel to wipe my hands after listening to me without passing judgment. His words were, "So now you have a choice. You can run again, or you can face this head on." "How?" "She'll destroy everything I've worked for." He took my knife and tested its sharpness, asking, "Will she? Or will she just expose what you've been afraid to face?" Sometimes our biggest fears are just shadows, Ella. They disappear when we shine a light on them. A text message from an unidentified number rang on my phone. It was a screen grab of an email sent to possible investors, most likely by Amelia. It went into detail regarding my family problems and money irregularities. The pop-up event, Marco said, could be an opportunity. Show everyone, Amelia, your family, these investors, exactly who you are and what you can do. Or it could be a trap. He grinned. Most likely both. But you're not that scared girl from Christmas morning anymore. You've learned more than just cooking techniques in my kitchen. I reflected on the previous 3 months, including the cuts, burns, and late hours spent honing recipes. With every minor triumph, I developed something beyond my culinary abilities. What's that saying you always use? I responded. The hottest fires make the strongest steel. He gave a nod. And you, my dear, are about to walk through fire. I grabbed up my knife and started chopping again, making deliberate, accurate cuts. Amelia believed she could exploit my past to ruin my future, but she had overlooked the most crucial culinary rule. Time is everything. Tell her I'm in, I responded, for the pop-up event. But I'm doing it my way. Marco grinned knowingly. Now that sounds like a chef talking. At 3 a.m, Tessa sent the following text. Can you meet me? Please don't tell Mom and Dad. Her eyes were red and swollen when I spotted her seated in her Volkswagen Beetle outside Marco's restaurant. Her normally flawless hair was pulled back in an untidy ponytail, and she had lost weight since Christmas. She replied, I failed 2 classes, as I got into the passenger seat. And I can't tell them? They think I'm applying to pre-med programs, but I haven't even started the applications. The quiet between us was filled by the gentle hum of the heater. This vehicle had represented every issue with our family's dynamic. It was like a confession booth now. Even though I already knew the answer, I questioned, why pre-med? My personal nightmare. Mom's backup plan, Dad's dream. She laughed, but her voice sounded more like a sob. How do you do it, Lai? Just walk away from their expectations? I reflected about Amelia's threats, the lottery ticket concealed in my apartment, and all the lies entangled in my purported bravery. I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about making good choices right now. At least you made a choice. She reached into her jacket and took out a crumpled piece of paper. I found this in Mom's study. It was a list. My movements were monitored. Notes of folks she'd spoken to in town. Tessa stated, she is aware of the culinary school. I felt sick to my stomach. Does she know about the money? Not yet, but she's obsessed with figuring out how you're paying for everything, she said. She thinks you're involved in something illegal. Dad's talking about hiring a private investigator. I didn't miss the irony. I had given them even more justification to meddle in my affairs by attempting to break free from their authority. There's more. Go on, Tessa. I overheard Mom talking to Amelia Stone's mother at the country club. They're planning something for that pop-up event, some kind of intervention or confrontation. They want to save you from yourself or whatever. I balled my hands into fists. Amelia would involve our mothers, of course. She was an expert at twisting the knife. Whispering, you should tell them the truth, Tessa whispered. About everything. Like you're telling them the truth about pre-med? She winced, and I instantly felt bad about what I had said. Both of us were imprisoned in distinct iterations of the same cage. Maybe, Tessa said hesitantly. Maybe we could help each other. I could come to your pop-up event, run interference with Mom, and you could help me figure out how to tell them about changing my major. To what? Photography, she confessed, displaying a collection of gorgeous culinary photographs on her phone. I've been practicing at restaurants around town. That's actually how I found out where you were working. The photographs were stunning, capturing the soul of each dish through the play of light and shadow. Their strict, meticulous approach to everything was quite different from our mother's. These are incredible, Tess. Really? Because sometimes I think I'm just being stupid and selfish, throwing away a real career for something you love, I said at the conclusion. Yeah, I know that feeling. We were swept by the headlights of a passing automobile. I briefly caught a glimpse of us as sisters fleeing the same darkness, but in opposite directions. I have to be at the restaurant in 3 hours, I replied. Want to come in? I could teach you some plating techniques. Give you something interesting to photograph. She grinned, but it wasn't the flawless smile she gave our parents. I'd like that. I became aware that something had changed when we entered Marco's kitchen. My quest for vengeance has evolved beyond simply disproving my parents. It was about ending a cycle and making room for Tessa and me to be different from what our parents wanted us to be. I had to make it through Amelia's pop-up event first though. The stakes were bigger than ever now that we knew our mothers were engaged. My future was no longer the only consideration here. Tessa's was also at issue. I said, "Hey," and gave her an apron. "Want to learn how to make Mom's favorite dessert? I have some ideas for improving it." Tessa smiled mischievously. Now that sounds like a photo opportunity. 3 days before the pop-up event, everything began to go wrong. While I was finishing up my menu in Marco's kitchen, Tessa stormed in the back door with her phone in her hand. She threw the screen at me and said, "You need to see this?" It was a gorgeously presented dish from Amelia's Instagram story that looked just like my go-to recipe. The one I had spent months creating. A sneak peek of our upcoming showcase, was the caption. The greatest inventions can occasionally be found in unlikely locations. I wiped my trembling hands on my apron. She's been watching me. Someone's been feeding her information. After saying, "That's not all," Tessa swiped to another post. It was a set of pictures taken at Amelia's restaurant during a private investor meeting. One photo had my mother sitting at the table with her face animated in discussion in the background. The cutting board clattered against the knife I was holding. "She's working with Mom?" "I overheard them yesterday," Tessa acknowledged. "Mom's been telling potential investors about your unstable behavior and questionable finances. They're trying to make sure no one backs your restaurant plans." Marco showed up next to us, looking serious. "The health inspector just called. Someone filed multiple complaints about our kitchen. They're coming tomorrow, right before your big prep day." There was a reason for the timing. Amelia was skilled at using my own mother as a weapon to harm me. I clutched the edge of the prep table as the room began to spin. "I can't do this," I said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm in over my head." Tessa's voice was stern as she said, "No. That's exactly what they want you to think. But look at this." She showed me pictures she had taken during our late-night cooking sessions by pulling up her camera roll. The photographs were breathtaking, showcasing not only the cuisine but also the love and imagination that went into each dish. "This is who you are, Elia. Not their lies. Not their manipulation." Marco, as he often did when he was making a point, picked up my fallen knife and tested its edge. "You know what separates a good chef from a great one? Not talent, not even creativity. It's what they do when everything goes wrong." "But she stole my recipe." He gave me the knife and said, "So make a better one. Show them who you really are, not who they think you are." As I gazed at the knife in my palm, I recalled all the evenings I had spent honing my cuts, all the burns and scars I had acquired via perseverance rather than innate skill. Amelia may have taken my recipe, but she was unable to take away my enthusiasm. "How skilled are you at social media marketing, Tessa?" I said gently. She smiled. "Better than Amelia, that's for sure." "Good? Because I have an idea." I looked across at Marco. "Remember that fusion dish we talked about? The one that combines Mom's traditional family recipe with modern techniques?" His face lit up with a smile as he nodded. "The one that's too risky? Too controversial?" "Exactly. Amelia wants to play it safe, stick to stolen classics. Let's give them something they can't copy. Something that tells our whole story on a plate." I recreated my mother's signature dish over the course of the following few hours, changing every component. My childhood comfort food was transformed into something fresh that evoked both tradition and defiance. Every step was recorded by Tessa, who used her camera to record the transition from the old to the new. Even Marco appeared impressed when the last meal was prepared. His words, "This isn't just food. This is your declaration of independence." Tessa captioned the pictures simply when she uploaded them. "Some recipes are passed down. Others are transformed." Coming soon to at Amelia Stone Showcase event. The post went viral in the local food community within a few hours. Amelia texted after making 2 calls. "You're making a mistake. Back down now or everything comes out, about the money, about your family, everything." For the first time that day, my hand was steady as I handed Tessa and Marco the text. When I said, "Let it come out, I'm done hiding," Marco gave a nod of approval. "Now you're cooking with fire." Tessa responded, "Just promise me one thing." As she lowered her camera. "When you face them, all of them, let me be there. Someone needs to document what happens when the golden child and the black sheep finally stand together." Retaliation and self-promotion were no longer the exclusive goals of the pop-up event. It was about finally writing my own life recipe and escaping all the ones that others had created. With the subtlety of a cooking fire, the pop-up event's night arrived. Other young cooks were vying for the interest of possible investors as I stood in Amelia's prep kitchen. My burners were inexplicably becoming cold, and my station had been accidentally positioned near to a drafty service door. "Equipment issues?" Amelia asked as she went past, her voice brimming with fictitious worry. Such a shame. But then, working with subpar tools builds character, doesn't it? I tried not to notice that she had placed my mother at a prominent table right in front of me, so I focused on my preparations. Evelyn Hawkins wore her critical face like a crown as she sat there like a queen at court. Someone shouted, 10 minutes to first service? I grabbed for my sauce with trembling hands, only to discover that the container was empty. Only a few minutes ago, I had filled it and had turned my back. Looking for something? Amelia produced a well-known container. Oh, this? Found it by the sink. Looked spoiled, so I tossed it. Health and safety, you know? In a flash, 3 months of labor were gone. Recalling Marco's remarks about maintaining control under duress, I held my knife so tightly that my knuckles turned white. However, this was deliberate devastation rather than merely pressure. L.A. With her camera in hand, Tessa showed up at my station. Mom's talking to the investors. She's showing them something on her phone. I felt sick to my stomach. I could see my mother making impassioned gestures through the service window, and the investors' expressions were getting serious as they turned to face me. With a shake of his head, one of them got up and left. Tessa muttered, "It's the lottery ticket." They know. The room began to swirl. Every cautious step I had taken toward freedom, everything I had created, was falling apart. No financiers. No sauce. There is no hope. Through my panic, a voice said, "Chef Hawkins? Health Department. We need to discuss some concerning allegations about your food handling practices." Naturally. The icing on the cake. I glanced around the kitchen, taking in my mother's contented grin, Amelia's victorious smile, and the other chef's adamant avoidance of eye contact. This was the feeling of complete defeat. "I'm done," I muttered as I tied my apron. "They win." Tessa grabbed my arm and said, "No. Remember what you told me about Mom's recipe, about making it your own? So your sauce is gone. Make something better. Something they can't steal or destroy." "With what?" "I have nothing left." She took out her phone and showed me the pictures she had shot of our late-night cooking sessions, saying, "You have me?" At the final picture, she paused. Marco and I were in the kitchen, giggling as I tried a failed dish that had unintentionally become something fantastic and completely different. Marco had remarked that evening that sometimes the best dishes come from disasters. I glanced at the essential elements that were still there, at my almost empty station, at my sister's resolute countenance, and then at my mother, who was now approaching us with that well-known look of disappointment. She began. "This has gone far enough. It's time to—" "You're right," I interrupted, grabbing my knife. "It has gone far enough. Tessa, start filming." Amelia shouted, "What are you doing?" As I started slicing the few items I had left quickly. "I'm cooking," I declared, my knife moving deliberately. "But not your way, or Mom's way, or anyone else's way. My way." The service was 20 minutes away. No sauce, no financiers, no assistants, just my trembling hands and my sister's camera. Maybe it was the intention, but all I had planned was in ruins. Perhaps in order to discover what I truly needed, I had to let go of everything I believed I desired. "Last call for plating," was said by someone. I gazed at my creation, honest, straightforward, the product of defiance and despair. It wasn't flawless. I hadn't even planned for it. However, it was truly mine. With her camera trained on my hands, Tessa questioned, "Ready?" I took the first plate and nodded. I could see my mother and the other investors waiting through the service window. This was my final opportunity to demonstrate that the greatest works can occasionally emerge from the darkest situations. After saying, "Time to serve," I pushed through the door. And I hope they're hungry for the truth. It was so quiet in the dining room when I served my homemade dish. I observed the investors leaning forward through Tessa's camera, their faces changing from doubt to interest. My mother's hands showed her anxiety by twisting her napkin under the table, but her face stayed purposefully expressionless. One investor examined the plate and remarked, "This isn't what was advertised." "No," I concurred. "It's better." This is what happens when someone tries to sabotage your carefully planned menu. You either give up, or you create something new. Amelia came out of the kitchen and I met her gaze. I turned to Amelia and asked, "Would you like to explain why my original sauce disappeared? Or should we ask my mother about the convenient timing of the health inspector's visit?" My mother said sharply, "Li," as a warning. However, I wasn't done yet. It's funny, Mom. I tried to replicate your recipes for years in an attempt to win your approval, but tonight, when everything was taken away, I finally got it. Real hunger produces the best food. For recognition as much as for food. For approval. Now that the investors were trying the meal, their appreciative mutterings were becoming more audible, and Tessa walked around the table, recording their responses, the way they nodded their heads and raised their eyebrows at one another. The principal investor remarked, "The combination of traditional and modern techniques is unexpected. The harmony of flavors. It narrates a tale." "That's because it's my narrative," I responded, "the genuine one, not the one they wanted to share. About creating something out of nothing. About converting rejection into motivation." With her poise crumbling, Amelia went forward and said, "You think you're so special? A tenacious underdog who—" "No," I said, "I believe that I am just what you fear. Someone who no longer need your approval, any one of you." I hadn't seen my father since Christmas morning, so his arrival was a shock to the room as he entered and stopped short at the scene in front of him. "What's happening?" he insisted. "Your daughter," the principal investor stated, "is going to get an offer of support for her restaurant idea. If she's interested, that is." My father's expression changed from one of bewilderment to something I had never seen before, perhaps recognition or regret. "The lottery ticket," he replied softly. "Isn't that how you accomplished all of this?" "The Christmas present you gave us," I said. "The one you never bothered to open." And I said, "Yes." Suddenly my mother got up and said, "You had no right to—" "Mom, to what?" "To want something different than what you planned," I yelled. "To be successful without your consent?" "You should ask your golden child how she feels about medical school," I said, gesturing to Tessa, who was still shooting. "Find out what she truly wants to accomplish with her life." All eyes shifted to Tessa, and the room fell silent once again as she dropped her camera, her hands calm despite her trembling voice. "I want to be a photographer," she said. "And Liz going to hire me to shoot for her restaurant's marketing." "No one is being hired by you." "This was a publicity stunt," Amelia yelled. The main investor stepped in and said, "These investors are very impressed, Miss Hawkins, both with the food and with how you handled unexpected challenges." My father came up and reached into his jacket, taking out a wrinkled, still unscratched scratch-off ticket that I had given him for Christmas. "I don't know why, but I kept it," he remarked. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to scratch it right now. Perhaps because that was the last thing you gave us before." He cleared his throat. "And I would like to invest money in your restaurant, regardless of its value." "Hey, Roger," my mom objected. However, he raised his hand and said, "No, Evelyn. We've already caused enough harm by attempting to dictate their lives. Take a look at what Ella produced tonight, despite all the odds being against her. Take a look at Tessa's images. We weren't afraid of these failures. They are artists." "I think we have some details to discuss, Miss Hawkins," said the principal investor, grinning and passing a business card across the table. "Every one of us." I looked at my father's unscratched ticket after picking up the card. "Keep it," I replied. "Some gifts are worth more unopened." I was too absorbed staring at my father's face when he finally saw me, not as a letdown, but as a chef, as myself, to observe Amelia storming away. I turned to the investors and said, "So, let's talk about opening night." The restaurant was packed, as it had been every night since it opened, and I was standing in my own kitchen, 6 months after the pop-up event, watching the dinner service unfold through the pass. The walls were covered in Tessa's photos, which included candid candids of our family's adventure as well as beautiful views of our hallmark dishes. Marco entered with a familiar envelope as the door slid open. He handed it to me and said, "Special delivery. Found this at my restaurant." Amelia's was the return address, and there was only one page inside. "Last week, I shut down my restaurant. It turns out that building success on other people's formulas isn't worth much. You were correct. You must be the one who is hungry." As I folded the letter, I reflected on how, somewhere down the line, revenge had lost its appeal. "Have you watched the special today?" I nodded toward a meal that was waiting at the pass as I asked Marco. He grinned when he saw my mother's famous recipe, modified but still hearty. "What was her reaction?" "She cried," I said. Then spent an hour telling me everything I'd done wrong while secretly eating every bite. I could see my family at their usual table through the kitchen window. My mother sat straight-backed as usual, but her eyes kept wandering to the kitchen with what appeared to be pride, and my father was showing Tessa something on her camera, presumably talking about her upcoming gallery show. My line cook said, "Chef, we have a situation." At the kitchen entrance, I turned to see a familiar face, Amelia, who appeared smaller and less assured. She blurted out, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I wanted to know if prep cooks are still being hired by you." I would have cherished this moment of defeat 6 months ago, but now, when I looked at her, I saw part of myself. That same hunger, just focused in the wrong direction for too long. The kitchen was silent, and everyone watched to see how I would respond. I said, "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., and be on time. Additionally, this time, Amelia, bring your own recipes." With a look of relief on her face, she nodded and rushed out. "You're not the same chef who burned with revenge in my kitchen," Marco said, giving me a shoulder squeeze. "No," I said. "I feel better now." Speaking of which, I took out the lottery ticket that my father had returned to me last week, stating that certain presents needed to be completed. He had kept it unscratched for months. "Do you want to take the lead?" I extended an offer to Marco. "Some things are worth more unscratched," he said, shaking his head. "Sometimes we learn more from the wonder of what might have been than from knowledge." I tucked the ticket under my chef's coat, where it lay close to my heart as a reminder of how far I'd come, while the dinner rush was intensifying and tickets were pouring in. "Lay. Mom is criticizing your plating once more." Tessa called from the dining room. "Tell her if she wants to reorganize my garnishes, she'll have to put on an apron and do it herself," I said, laughing and grabbing my knife. My mother surprised me by showing up at the kitchen doorway a few moments later, already rolling up her sleeves. "Well," she remarked, "would you demonstrate for me how this updated version of my recipe functions?" I gave her an apron and watched as she tied it using motions that were similar to mine. I learned that some wounds heal slowly, but that they do, especially when they are seasoned with time, truth, and a little bit of forgiveness. Making room at my station, I said, "Okay, Mom. Let me show you how hunger enhances the flavor of everything." A cacophony of sizzling pans, clicking dishes, and calling tickets filled the kitchen as it hummed around us. My rules, my restaurant, and my family, the one I was born into and the one I created, are all mine, no matter how imperfect. Additionally, an unscratched ticket in my chef's coat served as a reminder that sometimes the finest form of retaliation isn't providing cold food but rather inviting your adversaries to a warm table and teaching them how to prepare meals for themselves. My parents skipped my wedding because I married before my perfect sister. Now their perfect family image is finally crumbling. After being together for 4 years, I, 32F, got married 8 months ago. Except for my sister Malene, 30F, and my parents, everyone went to the wedding. My parents' decision to skip the event was startling, but I wasn't overly shocked by my sister's absence because we've never really gotten along. However, considering our past, I should have anticipated it. I'll give you some background on our family's dynamics. I can't completely blame my parents for constantly favoring my sister over me. Throughout her life, she has been exceptionally good at almost everything. She was the center of attention in every room she visited as soon as she could walk. She won every spelling bee, science fair, and talent show in elementary school. Class president, valedictorian, and prom queen were all very much the same in high school. Tall, slender, and attractive enough, she pursued modeling while in college before concentrating on her business degree. She got her first modeling job during her sophomore year, and I can still remember it. To celebrate, my parents invited all of our family members and her friends to a lavish party. Her first professional headshot was framed and hung in our living room, where it remains to this day, directly above the fireplace. The same year I received my degree in computer science, they merely murmured, "Well done," and resumed organizing Malene's next photo session. She immediately climbed the corporate ladder after graduating and landing a job at a prominent company. She already has a corner office and a corporate car at the age of 30, making her a senior executive. In the meantime, I work for a respectable computer company as a mid-level software developer. Although I'm pleased with my work and it's a decent profession, it's not the type of employment that makes parents boast in front of the family. In addition, I'm bigger and shorter than my sister. My mother made crude remarks about my appearance, signed me up for workout classes I didn't want to attend, and put me on diets all the time when I was growing up. She would say, "Malene never struggles with her weight." Or, "You could look as nice as your sister if you just put in a little more effort." Even though I had learned to ignore these remarks by high school, they had an impact. Over the years, I've accepted these distinctions. I ultimately came to terms with the fact that my parents never took as much delight in my accomplishments as they did in Malene's. What was my option? I tried to get their approval for years by attending classes they recommended, joining clubs they encouraged, and even attempted modeling for a short time, a failure my sister never lets me forget. However, nothing was ever sufficient. I was merely the second daughter, and they were completely enamored with my sister's achievements. I gave up attempting to impress them sometime in my mid-20s. I concentrated on creating my own life, growing professionally on my own terms, and forming bonds with individuals that respected me for who I am. To be honest, following that, things have improved. Knowing that my parents were constantly concerned about maintaining appearances, I kept my interactions with them superficial in order to prevent conflict. During our mandatory Christmas meals and sporadic family get-togethers, I would nod and grin while they raved about Maline's most recent job, lover, or vacation spot. Since they had Maline to swoon over, they didn't seem to notice my emotional distance. Then, at a computer conference, I ran upon my spouse through a mutual friend. He noticed me, actually saw me, unlike my family. He liked my dry sense of humor, my ability to code, and yes, even my body type, right from the beginning. He never once said I should change or make comparisons to other people. He proposed to me after 4 years of dating when we were alone at home, enjoying takeaway and our favorite TV in the background. It was flawless. Naturally, I told my folks that I was engaged last year. My first clue should have been their response. There was no congratulation, only stillness. My mother then questioned whether I was certain I wanted to jump right in and recommended that I might want to improve my physical condition before the wedding. My father didn't say much at all. During the engagement party, my husband noted their odd reaction, which I was too anxious to fully comprehend at the time. They crouched over my mother's phone in a corner for the majority of the evening. My husband then informed me that he had heard them talking to Maline on the phone, who was clearly crying. They were talking about how this wasn't the plan, and how they never expected Rebecca to get married first, according to what he vaguely heard. There were some minor setbacks during the wedding planning process. Despite not even being engaged at the time, my mother had already made many wedding Pinterest boards for Maline and was not interested in assisting me in selecting a dress or location. My mother merely remarked that it was practical and suitable for my figure when I selected my dress, a straightforward yet exquisite A-line gown that made me feel lovely. My future mother-in-law, who treated me like the daughter she never had, and I ended up working together on the majority of the preparations. I carefully reviewed and double-checked the guest list with my spouse to be sure no one was overlooked before sending out both electronic and paper wedding invitations. I am certain that my parents received theirs because the electronic invitations included red receipts. I called, texted, and emailed them several times after realizing they hadn't RSVP'd. My mails were either ignored or met with evasive responses stating that they were very busy and needed to check their schedules. I couldn't waste too much energy worrying about it because I was too busy getting ready for the wedding. My in-laws were incredibly helpful, offering assistance with everything from seating maps to floral arrangements. Even at the lovely bridal shower hosted by my husband's sister, the painfully obvious absence of my own family was never brought up. Even though my parents weren't there, the wedding day itself was beautiful. We held a laid-back afternoon celebration after the morning wedding in a garden setting. Everyone was right when they said we looked so content and in love. But there were times when their absence felt like a physical anguish, such as when I saw the front row seats empty or at the father-daughter dance that I was not able to attend. I sought answers after the honeymoon and wedding. They said they were deeply hurt, that they had never gotten a formal invitation when I eventually reached them on the phone. My mother launched into a lengthy tirade about how careless I was, how she had always wanted to assist in organizing her daughter's weddings, and how she couldn't comprehend why I would leave them out of such a significant occasion. I was perplexed by this since I was positive we had given them both kinds of invitations. During the call, I verified that we had indeed sent them by looking through our records. Even the physical invitation's delivery was confirmed. I didn't confront them about their attempts to gaslight me. I just said I was sorry for the error and hung up. Later, my husband brought up a number of incidents that demonstrated their true intentions, such as the way they appeared surprised rather than delighted when we told them we were engaged or the way they continued coming up with reasons not to assist with the wedding planning. Because he didn't want to add to my anxiety during the wedding planning process, he hadn't brought up these findings earlier, but in retrospect, the pattern was clear. The idea that I, the less successful daughter, was getting married before their beloved Maline was too much for them to bear. Their demeanor simply served to validate what I had always suspected but had resisted, that I would never be able to compete with my sister in their eyes. The most depressing thing was learning that even my wedding day, which ought to have been a celebration of love and fresh starts, turned into yet another front in their never-ending war to preserve their ideal family image, with Maline at its core. Maline recently got engaged to someone she's been dating for a year, according to family members I spoke with. In family group conversations that I don't participate in, my parents openly express their excitement about organizing an elaborate wedding for her. They are already boasting about securing upscale locations and luxury gowns, and my mother is taking Maline to private fittings at upscale stores. All the mother-daughter time I was not allowed. It's intriguing that a large number of our family are suddenly refusing to go to Maline's wedding and engagement party. My parents' actions at my wedding apparently became a topic of conversation in the family. I just tell my family members what I think is real when they inquire as to why my parents didn't attend my wedding. They couldn't bear it when I married before their beloved daughter. I present the facts as I perceive them, without embellishment or an attempt to win sympathy. My parents got in touch with me a few days ago and accused me of purposefully attempting to spoil Maline's wedding. According to their claims, the relatives they have spoken to are using reasons to avoid going to any of her wedding-related festivities. My cousin, to whom my sister vented, informed her that people are reluctant to come because they have heard about my parents' treatment of me. My parents claim that because I'm envious of my sister's impending lavish wedding, I'm spreading false stories. The problem is that I'm only telling folks the truth about what happened. Perhaps they should consider their conduct instead of blaming me for the results if the truth makes them appear terrible. As things continue to change, I'm finding it harder and harder to keep up the appearance of a relationship with my parents. Their behavior during my wedding finally made it clear to me that I would never be sufficient for them, regardless of what I did. Their absence at my wedding is no longer the most difficult aspect. It's coming to terms with the fact that I never had the kind, encouraging parents I always desired. I'm concentrating on creating a life with someone who genuinely appreciates me for who I am right now, but I'll keep you updated if anything important changes. First update. Since my last post, which was 2 weeks ago, a lot has transpired. I ultimately made the decision to speak with my parents face-to-face over their actions at my wedding and their current charges that I ruined my sister's special day after reading your encouraging remarks. I felt it was time to put everything on the table when they began texting me about their tarnished family history. My parents quickly started making accusations during our phone call, saying that I was jealous of Maline and had planned the entire thing. I did something I had never done before. I agreed with them, but not in the way they had anticipated, in place of defending myself as I usually would. I said to them, "You're correct. I'm envious. Not Maline's career, not her accomplishments, not her appearance. I'm envious of the unwavering love and support you've shown her, which you never even made an effort to show me." There was a pause in the line. My mother then began claiming that I was exaggerating and that they had always treated us equally. Something broke inside of me at that moment. Feelings that had been repressed for years came flooding out. I informed them of each birthday when Maline's most recent success eclipsed my own accomplishments. When Maline had a modeling callback, my mother canceled my high school graduation dinner. About how her prom outfit cost more than the total cost of my college textbooks for a year. I continued despite my father's attempts to cut me off by accusing me of exaggerating. I talked about how it was to watch them spend years organizing my sister's fictitious wedding while showing no interest in my own. I told them how painful it was to see my parents' seats vacant and how my mother-in-law had to help me with everything, from wedding preparation to clothing buying. Their reaction was instructive. They flipped it on me rather than accepting any of my arguments. "Why did you never speak up if you felt this way?" As if I hadn't tried to speak with them for years, my mother insisted. My father went on to say that by discussing these emotions with our family members, I was being unjust and spiteful. My mother said something at that point that ultimately clarified everything. "We never imagined you'd go to such lengths as to try to ruin Maline's wedding out of spite, but we always knew you were insecure about her success," she stated. "This is not how we brought you up." I became aware that they couldn't even hear me. They believed that their behavior and my emotions had nothing to do with the entire circumstance. It has to do with Maline's reaction. They were more worried about her impending nuptials than the hurt they had caused me, even during this discussion about their absence from my wedding. I didn't attempt to make things better for the first time in my life. I didn't retract or apologize. Rather, I expressed my thoughts to them directly. "You're correct on one point. I was raised by you. You instilled in me the belief that I would never measure up. That Maline's accomplishments would always be more significant than mine. That upholding your ideal family image was more essential than my feelings. However, you also taught me that I deserve better than this, which was something you didn't mean to teach me." Before my father spoke, there was a long pause. He spoke in a cool, collected tone. "Maybe it's time for us to stop acting like we're bad parents, since you've already determined that we are and you obviously take pleasure in seeing us suffer. Since you are family, we assumed you would assist in resolving this issue, but it is clear that you have made your own decisions." The last blow was delivered by my mother. "Perhaps you simply couldn't cope with not being the center of attention, even though we always tried to treat you both fairly. Rebecca, that's not our fault. You made the decision to play the victim." I refrained from arguing. Why would it matter? Everything I had been saying had just been validated by them. They were unable to admit their involvement in any of anything, even at this last discussion. I just hung up and said goodbye. I was surprised to feel relieved after the call. Tears were shed, to be sure, but they weren't the frantic, heartbreaking ones I remember from my early years. They were liberating tears. For the first time, I had expressed everything I needed to say without holding back or feeling guilty about how I felt. Later, my husband saw me gazing at the sunset from our back porch. He sat next to me and grasped my hand without saying anything. "They're never going to change, are they?" I asked him after a time. "No, but you have," he said, squeezing my hand. "And that is what counts." He is correct. I've changed. The young child who frantically tried to win her parents' approval is no longer there. They no longer need to validate the woman who came out of that last conversation. Although acknowledging that my parents will never be the people I need them to be is painful, it is not as painful as holding out hope that they would change. For the first time, I don't really care what happens with my sister's wedding or the family drama. I've had my say, and they now have to deal with whatever comes up. The most peculiar aspect? I feel as though a burden I've carried my entire life has finally been lifted. Although it's not the happy ending I had hoped for with my parents, perhaps it was the one I needed, the ability to quit striving for love that ought to have come naturally. Second update. 3 days have passed since my run-in with our parents, and things have taken a surprising turn. Malene made the decision to become involved in the drama, but her strategy failed horribly. My sister sent me a thoughtfully composed message yesterday morning. She had developed a condescending tone over the years, and it was evident in her text. "What you said to your parents was totally inappropriate. They have helped us through every stage of our lives and given us everything. You cannot simply blame them for being poor parents because you are insecure about the decisions you have made in life." She continued the message with her typical blend of moral superiority and covert jabs. "I understand that your wedding wasn't exactly what you had envisioned, but that doesn't mean you should try to destroy mine. There's nothing wrong with wanting a celebration that honors those of us who have put in a lot of effort to meet specific standards. Rebecca, not everything needs to be a contest." I didn't bother to answer. I've discovered that interacting with her merely provides her with more ammunition after years of putting up with her manipulative conduct. I just blocked her number instead. Malene has never been one to put up with being ignored, so I assumed that would be the end of it. My husband, who was laughing so hard that he could not speak, called me at work a few hours later. Malene was apparently unable to get in touch with me directly, so she found his personal number, probably via a common acquaintance, and sent him a string of texts outlining the precise reasons why our sister relationship has never been good. She began her initial communication to him in a sufficiently professional manner. As Rebecca's sister and someone who cares deeply about our family's well-being, I feel compelled to reach out. However, it soon turned into her actual motivations. She informed my husband that he had an obligation to help me behave in a more suitable manner because he was the new man in Rebecca's life. The messages become increasingly patronizing. "Family dynamics are complex," she told my husband, a professional software architect with an MBA, adding that someone with Rebecca's sensitivity might not understand the bigger picture. She advised him to assist me in seeing reason before I irreparably harm family relationships. Her attempt to play on what she believed to be his social climbing impulses was the true kicker, though. In fact, she wrote, "Surely you understand that maintaining good relationships with successful family members like myself could be beneficial for your future. Rebecca's behavior is only hurting her own prospects and, by extension, yours." Having always been able to see through Malene's facade, my spouse thought her attempt at manipulation was humorous. He particularly liked her presumption that her business rank or the prospect of networking opportunities would somehow impress him. In his own words, "She really doesn't know me at all, does she?" We went over the messages together when I got home that night. I was laughing with my hubby instead of feeling offended or upset. Seeing Malene's deceptive methods exposed, particularly when they were aimed at someone who was totally impervious to them, was liberating. I learned something significant about my sister as a result of this encounter. She is still that insecure adolescent who needs to tear others down in order to feel superior, despite all of her achievements and success. It's clear how little she knows about good relationships that she believed she could control me by manipulating my husband. When her direct approach failed, she swiftly turned to trying to use my husband against me, which was the most revealing aspect. She used to do precisely that in high school. She attempted to turn my friends against me when she was unable to bully me directly. Different decade, same strategies. With this fresh viewpoint, I now understand how Malene's actions went beyond simple sibling rivalry throughout our early years. She made a concerted effort to keep her status as the favorite child, always telling our parents, and me, how much better she was. She had to overshadow whatever I accomplished. She had to point out my shortcomings to everyone I made friends with. My response to her games is different now. Her messages would have caused me to fall into self-doubt 10 years ago. I would have been upset and hurt 5 years ago. Today? Simply put, I'm sick of the drama and find her blatant attempts at manipulation amusing. My husband's response was ideal. Rather than becoming embroiled in her drama, he merely responded, "Thank you for your concern about Rebecca's well-being. As her husband, I'm focused on supporting her happiness, not managing her behavior. I think it's best if you direct any future concerns to Rebecca directly. Have a nice day." Malene sent one last message after not receiving the desired response. "I see she's poisoned you against the family too. Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces." Ironically, Malene's attempt to assist has further strengthened my resolve to keep my distance from the destructive dynamics of my family. Nothing has changed, as evidenced by her messages to my spouse. She is still the same cunning individual who feels the need to dictate every story and who perceives any departure from her ideal family script as a danger. Knowing that her attempts at persuasion were so totally unsuccessful is perhaps the most pleasant aspect of the entire incident. She succeeded in bringing my spouse and I closer together rather than causing us to drift apart. Totally unconcerned by her fears of social repercussions, we joked about her texts and planned a weekend trip during the evening. I've come to understand that true family isn't about upholding facades or dictating stories. It's about standing together, laughing together, and supporting one another when someone tries to manipulate you, even your own sister. I'm more certain than ever that I'd be better off keeping a safe distance from Malene's wedding drama. Instead of getting sucked into my family's never-ending power struggles, my husband and I have made the decision to concentrate on creating our own happiness. Success is said to be the best form of retaliation, but I'm coming to realize that real success isn't about impressing people. It's about accepting your decisions and surrounding yourself with individuals that encourage rather than impede your own development. I feel more successful than ever by that metric. Third update. After my sister's unsuccessful attempt to control my husband 2 weeks ago, things have taken unanticipated turns. The situation is becoming worse despite my parents' desperate attempts to repair their reputation. I found out through family ties that my parents have been on a mad quest to correct the narrative. They have been phoning each relative separately and accusing me of spreading vile tales because I'm envious of Malene's ideal wedding. They claim that I'm just resentful since her wedding will be far more sophisticated and gorgeous than mine was. According to their most recent tale, I purposefully left them out of my wedding so I could act like the victim. It's funny that they still reside in the same home they've owned for 30 years and have the same email addresses since the invention of email, but they're saying I sent their invitation to an old email address and an old physical address. The good news is that their attempts to limit the harm are failing miserably. Our family members don't believe it. Actually, a number of family members have shared their personal accounts of my parents' history of partiality. According to one aunt, my mother had previously engaged in similar antics at family weddings in an effort to guarantee that Malene was the life of the party. The way my extended family has reacted to my parents' manipulation is the most fulfilling development. Important family members, some of whom were expected to have significant parts in the event, have stopped supporting Malene's wedding. They may no longer have access to the exclusive location they were able to get through family ties. Even a family friend's luxury garment business has unexpectedly experienced scheduling conflicts. At a family get-together last weekend, things reached a breaking point. It seems that when someone naively inquired about my wedding pictures, my mother became upset. Out of jealousy, she started a defensive tirade about how I had changed after getting married and was attempting to destroy the family. Her tantrum backfired, stunning a number of relatives who were unaware of the circumstances and further harming their well-maintained reputation. It's especially ironic that my parents' frantic efforts to maintain their ideal family facade are the reason it's falling apart. Each time they attempt to justify their absence from my wedding, they wind up disclosing more about who they really are. People are becoming more aware of their deception the more they attempt to portray me as the bad guy. Family members are now picking sides after previously remaining impartial. Recently, even my father's brother, who had always kept silent to maintain harmony, apologized for not speaking up sooner about how they treated me. He has made the decision not to go to any of Malene's wedding-related festivities with his family. I don't have to answer any of this explicitly, so I haven't. The truth is taking care of everything for me. Malene and my parents always wind up revealing more of their destructive conduct when they attempt to twist the tale. It comes out that all those years of remaining silent and putting up with their treatment in an effort to keep the peace was really just a way of allowing their actions. My husband said it in the best possible words. They constructed a facade of the ideal family over many years, But it was based on emotional manipulation and partiality. Eventually, it was going to fall apart. I'm doing better than ever, personally. I no longer have to worry about attempting to win my parents' approval. The stress of controlling Maline's emotions has subsided. I'm not concerned about upholding their ideal family image for the first time in my life. Sometimes the best retaliation is just letting the truth speak for itself rather than taking action. I'm grateful to Reddit for giving me the courage to advocate for myself. You have no idea how much your guidance and encouragement have meant to me along this path. Sometimes you need to see what true family support looks like from strangers you met online. I took back my house and left my mother homeless after she disowned me for not attending my sister's wedding. Hey Reddit, my mom's favorite was always clear when I was growing up. My younger sister Rachel, 37F, and I, 42F, are the children of my mother, Karen, 62F. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world the instant Rachel was born. I don't want to come across as theatrical, but this is the reality. My mother was naturally quite protective of Rachel because she was born underweight and ill. I get that it must have been frightening for her to have a sick kid, but Rachel was the only child that Karen cared for, rather than merely the family's baby. Rachel received royal treatment. Her needs, wants, and moods were the center of attention. For example, Mom would hand-feed Rachel until she was well into middle school since she disliked eating by herself. Mom would simply complete any school projects or homework for Rachel. No questions asked, Mom allowed Rachel to stay at home if she didn't feel like going to school. And then there was me. I had clothes, food, and other essentials, so I wasn't completely disregarded, but I was alone emotionally. Unless it had to do with Rachel, Mom never truly cared about me. Mom was preoccupied at a spa and forgot about a dentist appointment I had when I was around 10 years old. After hours of waiting outside the school, a family friend saw me and offered to drive me home. My mother pretended it wasn't a huge thing when I returned. "Oh, I thought you'd figure it out," she simply said. The only person who actually saw me was my father, Michael, may he rest in peace. He wasn't home as much as I would have liked because he worked so much, but when he was, he tried his best. When Karen and Rachel weren't there, Dad and I would go out for movies or ice cream. He would give me extra cash for birthdays or school outings, but he would urge me not to tell my mother. In retrospect, I believe he was attempting to compensate me for feeling so unnoticed. But Dad could not deny the favoritism no matter how hard he tried. Everything was always better for Rachel. I had to save money or work for what I desired. Rachel, however, only needed to ask, and it would materialize. I requested a bike one Christmas, and Rachel made a last-minute request for the same item. Rachel received a brand new, gleaming bike beneath the tree on Christmas morning. I received some socks. "You're older," Mom responded when I inquired why. "You can get one for yourself by saving money." However, it was more than just material possessions. Rachel's happiness was Karen's obsession. Mom would move quickly to resolve whatever small problem Rachel was having, such as a friend not texting her back or receiving a poor grade. I quickly learned not to bother going to her for anything, though, as she would tell me to stop being so dramatic, or figure it out like an adult, whenever I was upset about something. Of course Rachel took it all in. Why wouldn't she? She was living the dream since Mom took care of everything for her, so she didn't have to do anything. Rachel eventually stopped learning even the most fundamental life skills. She was incapable of managing her own schedule, cooking, or even cleaning. Rachel was totally reliant on her mother since she protected her from everything. I didn't know how toxic the dynamic was until high school. Mom would complete Rachel's schoolwork after she would sob to her about how difficult her lessons were. Mom pleaded with the principal to have Rachel's grades modified after she failed high school, accusing the teachers of failing to recognize her unique needs. Naturally, it didn't succeed, but it demonstrated the lengths Karen will go to in order to shield Rachel from responsibility of any kind. However, I was supposed to be self-sufficient. I had to work things out on my own if I had trouble in school. I had to use the money I earned from babysitting if I wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. And Karen would tell me, "You're the older sister. You need to set an example," if I ever ventured to voice my displeasure. I was eager to be out of high school by the time I graduated. I never looked back after enrolling at a college in a different city. I never made a better choice than to move away. I was able to breathe for the first time. I didn't have to compete for Karen's attention or continually compare myself to Rachel. I might simply be myself. Rachel, meanwhile, remained at home and didn't leave until she was 26 years old and married. Karen continued to be involved in her life even at that point, phoning her 5 times a day to inquire about topics like, "What did you eat?" or "How is your hubby doing?" She even unexpectedly came up to bring Rachel groceries or clean her house, even though Rachel and her husband were more than capable of handling those tasks on their own. For my part, I was going about my life. I obtained a job after graduating from college and began constructing my future. Dad kept in touch with me by giving me frequent phone calls and coming to see me when he could. Not so much Karen. She would occasionally comment on my Facebook posts or send me a birthday text, but that was about it. I honestly didn't give a damn. Her unrelenting criticism and partiality no longer burdened me, and I was joyful. In hindsight, I believe Karen's fixation on Rachel stemmed from a desire for control. She never allowed Rachel to grow up because she wanted her to always be in need of her. I had to fend for myself after being thrown out of the nest early. Although it was painful at the time, I now consider it a blessing. While Rachel became totally dependent on Karen, I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. The dynamic remained the same even after I left. Karen was Rachel's facilitator, I was the forgotten child, and Rachel was the golden child. Some things never change, which is humorous. Not funny haha, but funny in a depressing manner. But everything did 11 years ago. At first, Dad's frequent coughing didn't seem like a huge concern. He blamed it on a recalcitrant cold or allergies. However, he didn't get better as the weeks stretched into months. He actually grew worse. He was usually exhausted, breathless, and simply not himself. Nevertheless, he continued to labor because he was a selfless, industrious man who always put the needs of others before his own. Karen didn't appear to notice at all. She was too preoccupied with her daily schedule of yoga sessions, spa visits, and whatever else occupied her time. After her first marriage ended, Rachel was back at home by that point. She didn't appear to be really worried about Dad's health, and she wasn't working either. They seemed unwilling to face the inconvenience of admitting that something was amiss. I was trying to keep some distance from all the family dysfunction while establishing my career in a distant place. During our frequent phone conversations, I could sense that something wasn't right. He sounded more worn out and weaker. He dismissed my question about whether he had seen a doctor, claiming to be all right. I knew he wasn't though. When he eventually went to the hospital following an especially severe coughing spell, things reached a breaking point. A serious lung infection was the diagnosis. When I learned, I immediately dropped everything and ran home. I was appalled when I arrived. Dad was laying in bed by himself, looking so weak and ill. Rachel and Karen? They were out getting manicures. Karen pretended to be shocked to see me when they returned. She even attempted to give me a hug, but I refused. When I questioned her why she wasn't with Dad, she said that she had errands to run. Both had recently had their nails done and were carrying shopping bags, so it was clear they had just left the spa. I spent as much time as I could with Dad when he was admitted to the hospital. Every now and then, Karen would stop by, but only for a few minutes. Rachel? She said it was too hard for her to see him in that state, and she hardly turned there at all. I was balancing everything at the same time, including communicating with doctors, controlling his medicine, and attempting to make him comfortable. On most nights, I even slept in a chair by his bed. It was frustrating that Karen didn't participate. It's not like she was too busy to be there because she didn't work. However, she pretended that going to the hospital was a huge hassle. The day she stated, "He's in good hands with the nurses," will always stick in my memory. Should I just sit there, or what? Yes, Karen, supporting your husband is exactly what you're meant to do. Dad was released from the hospital after a week. We hired a nurse to assist at home because he still required round-the-clock care. Karen was expected to take charge and assume greater responsibilities, yet she continued to be untrustworthy. She would leave for hours to run errands, only to return with shopping bags, or she would fail to give him his medications on time. On one occasion, she chose to stop at the salon before picking up an oxygen tank for him. I had already made arrangements for someone else to deliver it by the time she arrived home. Rachel wasn't any better. She said she avoided Dad completely because she couldn't bear to see him in such a vulnerable state. She spent much of her time in her room watching TV or browsing on her phone. She even went on vacation with her friends during one of Dad's worst bouts, leaving me to manage everything by myself. In the end, I resigned my job to care for Dad full-time. To be honest, I didn't want to leave him alone with Karen or Rachel, and I didn't trust them to do it. He was worthy of better. In order to keep him from feeling lonely, I prepared his meals, assisted him with his physical therapy, and made sure he had company. I loved him, so even though it was exhausting, I would do it all over again if I had to. As Dad's health deteriorated, Karen did make an attempt to work harder, but it was too late. She would sit next to him, but she would be glued to her phone, either talking to Rachel or posting on social media. It seemed as though she was unable to fully focus on him. Rachel only arrived after being coerced by Karen, and even then, She would excuse herself and depart after a short while. A few months later, Dad died. The nurse, I, and a few of his friends who had come to bid him farewell were all around him. Rachel and Karen. They weren't present. Rachel was out with friends, and Karen had gone to some sort of wellness retreat. When it became apparent that Dad was running low on time, I contacted both of them, but they did not answer. The funeral went by quickly. I was tired and heartbroken, but I still had to put up with the bullshit from Rachel and Karen. As though she hadn't been ignoring all the warning signals for months, Karen talked to her friends about how unexpected Dad's death was for the majority of the funeral. Rachel made a huge show of crying, but it felt so forced. She hadn't given a damn when it counted. Dad's attorney called me a few weeks after the funeral to discuss his will. I was hoping for a tiny inheritance or a memento, but nothing more. However, I was taken aback when I met with the attorney. Dad had bequeathed the house, his savings, and his assets to me. Rachel and Karen received nothing. Given how little his wife and youngest daughter cared for him, I could only imagine how much anguish Dad must have been going through in his last months. He expressed his appreciation for everything I'd done for him by leaving everything to me. It caused a firestorm, though. When Karen and Rachel learned, they were furious. In fact, Rachel yelled at the attorney, stating that she could never be subjected to this treatment by her father. Karen called and insisted that I give them a piece of the inheritance. I declined. For the sake of my sanity, I disconnected from Rachel and Karen. Their sense of entitlement was draining. I eventually met my husband after relocating to the city where I was employed and concentrating on starting again. We relocated abroad for his work, got married, and had a baby. To be honest, I didn't feel the need to tell Karen or Rachel about it because it was a new beginning. After a few years, I became a mother to my daughter. Karen appeared at my place out of the blue. It was unexpected to see her at my door as I hadn't spoken to her in years. She appeared more worn out and less put together. She sobbed, expressed regret, and expressed her want to be involved in my daughter's life. She even acknowledged that she felt bad about the way she raised me. She said she just wanted to make amends because she had been living with remorse ever since Dad died. Although I must admit that I didn't trust her, I chose to give her a chance. It was all right for a time. Karen would occasionally send gifts and make video calls to see how my daughter was doing. For once it felt normal. Then, predictably, the hints began. I thought it would go away, so I disregarded Karen when she casually said how hard life had been for her since I took everything, or how she was having financial difficulties. Karen gave me a call around a month ago. The fact that she seemed enthusiastic made me uneasy right away because Karen doesn't call unless she needs something. She struck up a discussion by inquiring about my spouse and daughter, which was already strange. Then she revealed the shocking news that Rachel was getting married once more. As you recall, Rachel's first marriage ended almost a year later. She never really put her life back on track after moving back in with Karen. Rachel and I hadn't spoken for more than 10 years, so this news was unexpected. Karen talked endlessly on Rachel's significance of this wedding, how it was a new beginning for her, and how pleased the family would be. I congratulated her, was courteous, and assumed that was the end of it. But obviously not. Karen went on to say something like, "You know, Rachel has had a really difficult time organizing this wedding within her budget. After everything she's been through, she deserves a lovely day." I knew where this was going, so I said nothing. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. To begin with, Rachel and I don't even communicate. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to backtrack when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no. I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen were behaving as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? You were what we needed. That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. You already treated me like I didn't exist, I responded, laughing. What makes a difference? I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They didn't try to patch things up between them. I finally came to the conclusion that enough was enough. I needed to reclaim what was properly mine since they had stayed too long. "I was hoping you could help out with the expenses," she finally added. "Considering everything your father left you, it's the least you can do." I was astounded. I don't even speak to Rachel, to start. Second, what level of entitlement is required to demand payment from someone who isn't even invited to the wedding? Indeed, Karen made it apparent that I was not invited. "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to travel with a baby, but of course, you're welcome to come," Karen said in an attempt to retract her statement when I brought this up. "Your sister is getting married, so you don't need an invitation." I bluntly told her no, I had nothing to pay for. She attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I had an obligation to assist Rachel as the older sister. She also mentioned Dad's wealth, saying that while Rachel was struggling, I was hoarding the family fortune. I informed her that Rachel and I were not romantically involved and advised her to get in touch with Rachel directly if she needed assistance. Rachel, predictably, never did. Karen didn't accept rejection. She kept bringing up the same point in her voicemails and texts over the course of the following few weeks. I was disappointing Rachel, I was self-centered, and I didn't care about my family. "If you don't help, it will ruin Rachel's big day and everyone will know it's your fault," she even stated. The problem is that Rachel and Karen behaved as though I owed them money. But when I needed assistance, where were they? I was the one who put everything on hold to take care of Dad while he was ill. While everybody continued living their lives, I was the one who remained by his side. And now they wanted me to come through and save the day after years of silence? Not at all. Karen made matters worse by asserting that Rachel had already reserved the space and paid deposits for musicians, caterers, and decorations. Since the invitations had already been sent, she claimed that canceling everything would make the family look foolish. If they couldn't afford it, how did they plan all of this? I asked her. What did she say? "You were what we needed." That was the last straw. I informed Karen that because I wasn't providing them any money, she could solve the problem on her own. She broke down in tears and threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't help. "You already treated me like I didn't exist," I responded, laughing. "What makes a difference?" I hung up and blocked her after that. Although he cautioned that there would be criticism from extended family, my husband supported my choice. He was correct. Some family members contacted me and said that since family is family, I should be the bigger person and lend a hand. However, where was all of this concern when Karen and Rachel were treating me like trash? I disregarded them and refused to back down. I haven't replied, and to be honest, I don't intend to, but Karen left me a voicemail with the words, "If you can live with ruining your sister's wedding, then I guess you're not the person I thought you were. Too much of my life has been devoted to going above and beyond for folks who don't value it. I'm finished." I reached my breaking point after the wedding drama. In the house Dad left me, Karen and Rachel had been living rent-free for more than a decade. A part of me believed that especially after Dad's passing, it would be simpler to avoid the drama of evicting them. But as time went on, I came to see that they were not appreciative of me, did not respect me, and had no plans to ever be respectable. Let's go back a little. Karen and Rachel were furious that Dad left everything to me when his will was read. Karen said that because she had lived there for many years, it was her house. Rachel screamed about how unjust it was during her tantrum. In actuality, though, neither of them was worthy of a dime. When they couldn't even bother to come up most of the time, Dad left me the house because he could see how much I cared for him in his last months. "I see you, and I appreciate you," was how he expressed his gratitude. I allowed them to remain in the house even after I inherited everything. I had the hope that they might change. However, Karen never once offered to pay me rent and instead rented out one of the rooms to pay for her own costs, acting as though the house was hers. I was treated like a villain by Rachel, who told the rest of the family that I had tricked Dad into excluding her from the will. They certainly enjoyed living in a house they didn't pay for, but they didn't try to patch things up. After Karen's absurd request that I cover Rachel's wedding costs and the constant attempts at manipulation, I finally had enough. I had an eviction notice prepared after I called my attorney. Karen went insane when she got it. "You can't evict me," she yelled when she called me. "I call this place home. I've spent 45 years here." I politely told her that she had 30 days to leave the house and that it was legally mine. Naturally, Rachel threw herself into the conflict. She accused me of being greedy and callous, calling me every possible insult in the book. "I just cared about Dad to get the inheritance," she said. It was absurd. I'm the terrible guy, even though she was the one who hardly ever saw Dad while he was dying. Karen did everything she could to get me to reconsider. She pretended to be tough at first, adding, "I dare you to kick me out." She then softened, saying that the house was all she had left and that she was too old to start again. "I'm not going anywhere." As if it wasn't the place I should have been collecting rent on for years, she even sobbed about how she had been renting out a room to make ends meet. It didn't work. Her attempt to guilt-trip me by asking, "What would your dad think if he saw you throwing your mother out on the street?" was the last straw. "Dad left me the house for a reason," I explained to her. "Perhaps he would still be alive if you had given him even half the attention you gave to spa sessions." I realized that was harsh, but I had had enough of sugarcoating things. Karen had to deal with the repercussions of her decisions. The eviction wasn't warmly received by Rachel either. She made a huge deal out of telling Karen to temporarily move in with her. She boasted to every one of her relatives over the phone that she was supporting Karen and that she didn't require anything from me. She seemed to want a round of applause for performing the absolute minimum, and it was all very performative. On the 26th day of the 30-day notice period, Karen left. I didn't even make an effort to appear. To oversee the transition, I engaged a property manager. I had the house refurbished and cleaned after it was vacant. I made the trusting decision to rent it to the brother of a family friend. Knowing that the house would eventually be occupied by individuals who valued it was a pleasant feeling. In the meantime, because I wouldn't pay, Rachel's elaborate wedding plans fell through. She was forced to move from an elegant lakefront location to a municipal hall. It seems that this embarrassed a number of people in their social circle, and Rachel's fiancé wasn't pleased either. He didn't even want a large wedding, it turns out. Shortly after Karen moved in with Rachel, I began to hear rumors of trouble in paradise because Rachel had assured him she would find a way to pay for it, which was obviously code for "my sister will pay." Having his mother-in-law as a frequent visitor to the residence did not sit well with Rachel's husband. As usual, Karen felt compelled to interfere in their lives. She would make fun of Rachel's cooking, or remark on how Rachel's husband managed the house, and overall be a pain in the neck. Some family members have attempted to use guilt-tripping to get me to forgive Rachel and Karen. They insist that I should have allowed Karen to remain in the house and that I have gone too far. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I don't care about these people's thoughts anymore because they remained silent when I was being tormented. Let's go on to the final update now. I believed that I would finally be at peace after Karen moved in with Rachel. I cut off most of the toxic relatives who tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving Karen and Rachel, rented out the house, and concentrated on my family. I must admit that I was relieved when I didn't hear from them for a time. Naturally, though, that didn't last. I received a contact from a mutual relative inquiring whether I had heard anything about Karen and Rachel's situation around 2 months after the eviction. I hadn't, and I wasn't sure I cared, to be honest. But I had to ask since I was so curious. They told me things that were both frustrating and, dare I say it, gratifying. Chris, Rachel's husband, apparently had enough of Karen's interference and issued Rachel a final ultimatum: either she leaves or I leave. Due to the wedding fiasco, Rachel was already at odds with him. Do you recall that she had promised him a lavish wedding, which I was supposed to pay for? Rachel felt ashamed in front of her friends and his family when they were forced to settle for a modest town hall ceremony when things didn't work out. There was a lot of friction in their relationship as a result of her disregarding Chris's warnings not to overextend financially. Things only got worse when Karen moved into their house. Chris's cuisine, his parenting skills, they have a toddler, and even his communication with Rachel were all criticized by Karen. Ironically, given her own financial mess, she would advise them on how to handle their money. For a while, Chris tried to put up with it, but after one very heated argument in which Karen accused him of not being man enough to care for his family, he told Rachel that it was either him or Karen. Rachel pleaded with him to change his mind, but he refused. The worst part is that Karen didn't go out in silence. She lost it when Rachel informed her of Chris's ultimatum. She also threatened to remove Rachel from her will, which was a pointless threat given that Karen had nothing to leave behind, and accused Rachel of abandoning her like everyone else. After they got into a heated dispute, Rachel, who was probably embarrassed and upset, advised Karen to work it out on her own. Where has Karen disappeared to? Not surprisingly, she made an attempt to get in touch with me. She asked me if I would think about allowing her to return to the house via email. Yes, an email, as I had blocked her on all other platforms. She wrote on how harsh life had been to her and how, as a mother, she had always tried her hardest. She even attempted to present it as a chance for us to mend and re-establish our bond. I didn't even think to answer. Her deceptive strategies were now just depressing. Karen attempted to use guilt tripping to persuade some extended family members to take her in after I failed to respond. The majority of them flatly refused, most likely due to their observation of her methods. A distant cousin consented to let Karen stay for a short while, but she was asked to leave after just 3 weeks. Evidently, the cousin had had enough of her persistent complaints and demanding demeanor. Rachel is currently coping with the consequences of her choices. Although Chris stayed with her, their relationship is apparently in very bad shape. Chris has been withdrawing both financially and emotionally as a result of the wedding costs, Karen's turmoil, and Rachel's inability to accept responsibility for anything. Rachel has been telling everyone that he, not her, is the issue, even though he even recommended couples counseling. According to what I've heard, Rachel has been complaining to her family about how unfair it is that Dad gave me everything. She said that none of this would have occurred if I had simply divided the inheritance. She intentionally omits the part where she and Karen treated me like a monster for caring about Dad and disregarded him in his last months. With them, it's always someone else's fault. I've been doing okay in spite of their turmoil. The best choice I've ever made was to lease out the house. The space is truly loved and respected by the renters, a lovely family. I now have financial stability and can invest in my daughter's future thanks to the rental income. My spouse and I are doing well in our jobs, and we have begun preparing for a long overdue family getaway. Regarding Karen and Rachel, they have already made their decisions and are now dealing with the fallout. Rachel is trapped in a marriage that is about to end, while Karen continues to move between relatives. I simply don't care about them anymore. I don't mean any harm. The most liberating thing of all has been realizing that their turmoil is no longer my problem. I appreciate you reading and all of your help along the process, Reddit. Thank you for everything, and be careful.